Hey everyone, welcome to TechstrongTV. I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO of Techstrong, filling in today for the one and only Charlene O'Hanlon, who's off in New York City. Thanks for joining us. I hope you had a great weekend. It was a great weekend for us here at Techstrong. We kicked off our digital CXO dinner series in New York last week, and we had a fantastic speaker, Stephen Ward of Insight Partners, former CISO of Home Depot, former Secret Service person. It was a fascinating conversation with Stephen, as well as Dan Kirsch, our very own Dan Kirsch, managing analyst at Techstrong Research with some research on AI and ML. It was a great discussion. We're doing a whole series of these digital CXOs, smaller events, 25, 35 people, dinner networking events throughout the U.S. If you're a digital CXO and you're interested, sign up at digitalcxo.com, let them know. And we'd love to see you at one of those events. They're really turning in to be fantastic. We have speaking of fantastic, we have a great show for you lined up today on TechstrongTV. Let me just briefly give you the lay of the schedule, and we'll jump into it. First of all, really happy we have Mitchell Ashley. Of course, Mitchell is our CTO as well as principal at Techstrong Research, principal analyst. Mitch is talking with Matt Provo. Matt is the CEO and founder of Stormforge, formerly known as Carbon Relay. And, Matt's a really bright guy. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Matt several times. And they announced something new today called Stormforge Optimized Light. It's a new solution for automatically and intelligently improving the efficiency of production environments. Great stuff. Matt will tell Mitchell all about it, so you want to tune in on that. After that, we have our good friend, the haunted hacker, Mike Jones. It's part one of one of his episodes. And in this episode, Mike has Zach M. of the Cyber Defense Services on. And Mike and Zach are going to talk about the philosophy, psychology, success, the egoist anarchism, power, happiness, and personal drive. Sort of what goes into the psyche of a hacker. Good stuff. I think you'll enjoy Mike and Zach's discussion. After that, we're going to go to something old, and we're going back to our Predict event, which was just in mid-January. And it features my good friend Mark Miller, who, if you didn't know, Mark was recently announced as the VP of Community over at the Linux Foundation. So congratulations to Mark. And Mark is joined by Jasmine Henry, who's Field Security Director at Jupiter One. Of course, when this was originally aired at Predict, Mark was with Jasmine at Jupiter One, and they're going to talk about career paths in cybersecurity. And in the cyberspace, that's probably one of the most frequent questions we hear. How do I get started? How do I build a career in cybersecurity? And it's a different field than when I first got into security 20 years ago. There were no 25 years ago, there weren't classes in cybersecurity. Well, actually, there were SANS classes, right, and that the like of that. You had CISSPs, but you didn't have college majors and so forth in it. So it is a different kind of path that these folks take today. But nevertheless, people are often wondering, what is that path? How do I get on that path? So good discussion there from Predict. After that, we're going to do the news with Charlene, of course, and Charlene was able to kind of phone in the news for today, and she'll have it. And then Charlene talks with Bhagwal Swaroop, President and General Manager of One Identity. And, of course, One Identity's been in the news lately, as has all, the identity and password identity and access control vendors. But Bhagwal and Charlene discuss the challenges companies are having managing authentication and access in their cloud environment. Charlene, by the way, will also give us a preview of webinars this week, as well as some InnoTech for our InnoTech events coming up in Austin and Dallas. So check that out. After that, we're going to go over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitch has two great videos segments today. One is on cybersecurity risks facing owners of cryptocurrency. I don't report a lot on cryptocurrency. I be honest, it's not my bag, but it's certainly one of the most popular topics we're hearing from the audience. Right? It's crypto, and it is the currency of choice for cyber criminals as well, I believe. So Mitch is gonna talk about that, along with IronScale's founder and CEO Elal Benchut. If I mispronounced Elal's last name, I apologize. After that, Mitchell has another good interview with Kyle Trebs, SVP Application Security at Imperva. Imperva's recent API security product announcements resulting from the acquisition of CloudVector last year are now starting to bear fruit, and for good reason, right? We have seen sort of API security subverting or sitting in front of the WAF, Web Application Firewall. And of course, Imperva is one of the founders, leaders of the WAF kind of market, but the API security market is, I think, the next challenge that WAF vendors need to take on. So this is a timely discussion with Mitch and Carl of Imperva. After that, really happy to have a View with Vizard, of course, our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. And Mike, in this episode, is meeting with Byron Fila. I think it's actually File, Global Account CISO for BT Americas, and he's going to explain why security and network management are converging into a single service. And that seems right to me because, in my mind, security came out of network management, right? When I got into security, most security folks did come from the network management side. So, what's old is new again. Good discussion there with Mike and Brian. And that's going to wrap it up for Monday. We're really happy you're joining us. We're going to take a break. We'll have our first guest right on. Enjoy your day. You're watching TechstrongTV.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, the great pleasure of being joined by Matt Provo. Matt is CEO and founder of Stormforge. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I know you're not new to TechstrongTV. You've been on before, but we're glad to have you back and talking about some exciting things. But do tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about Stormforge for folks that may not know.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stormforge was founded in late 2015. Kind of always been a machine learning driven focused company with this pain for myself on, from the very beginning of the company around, let's not just slap AI onto something backed by a marketing budget. Let's build something real at the core. And then let's figure out how to actually productize that and then connect it to a market opportunity that actually allows us to build a business and grow. And so, we've been, first number of years at Stormforge, we were essentially kind of an R&D shop. We had patient investors, thankfully, and we were able to really build what we have at our core. And then, from late 2019, early 2020 forward, we've been starting to take that to market. And so Stormforge is focused on resource efficiency within a Kubernetes world. And so how do you use machine learning to automate away the tasks that no developer in the world wants to be doing on an ongoing basis? So most notably kind of tuning their application. And so our platform uses a series of different data inputs to be able to to optimize how resources are being consumed within Kubernetes, and usually resulting in 40 to 60% cost savings, and somewhere between 30 and 50% improvement in performance. And so we don't want developers to have to choose between cost or performance. We want them to be able, in one platform, to be able to achieve, the business objectives they have for their application, typically across a cost and performance continuum.
Yeah, I love your story, and we've talked about that on other segments of TechstrongTV. But the opportunity to really take a problem that you've experienced and have, and designing around a solution for that versus I have a product idea, let me get somebody to fund it. Investors invest in people as much or more than products and ideas. So you're a perfect example of that. Well, tell us a little bit about, in the observability space, of course, AI and machine learning is a big part of what you're doing at StormForge. There are a lot of people in this space, and you've carved out the segment of focusing around Kubernetes and, not just cost savings, but performance, and focusing on the developer. So rather than coming up through the traditional sort of operations and IT, log management, aggregation, et cetera, moving into observability, you've taken a very different angle. So what's your take on the market, where we are in its growth and evolution?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we, as you mentioned, we lifted and shifted from Docker Swarm to Kubernetes, and actually had a massive pivot as a company. The first application of our core technology was around how electricity is consumed, and servers, HVAC equipment, manufacturing equipment, and we were on Docker Swarm, and it was in our own lift and shift to Kubernetes, where at that time in 2018, it was still really challenging to get your first cluster up and running at all on Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about I think even in this segment on a new partnership that we have. But that problem is largely solved now. Getting those clusters up and running and how that works is largely solved. When we lifted and shifted, we also saw the growth of observability and APM. And there's a series of, series of folks that are kind of moving ahead from a market share standpoint and making a lot of progress. And so we never viewed ourselves as an APM or observability platform. We always viewed observability or telemetry as a data input for our core machine learning. And so the same thing that we've done historically with load and performance tests as a data input, we're doing with telemetry and observability data. And to your point on not coming up through, logs and traces, that's where we're headed as well, though, is basically staying focused and then going down the stack and adding in a bunch of new data inputs to be able to, optimize ultimately and someday in a Kubernetes world across the entire cluster. And so for us, the APM and observability platforms are a fantastic integration and partnership point. We work really seamlessly with them. We integrate nicely and I think overall have a great relationship with them. What we want to do is kind of take that Intel inside model where we take observability and APM and we make it even more intelligent and proactive. And so the API, we're seeing more and more data captured in a Kubernetes world than ever. And observability and APMs have a huge role to play in that. But if you can't be proactive with that data, if you're reactive to what those insights are providing for you, the business will have moved on. And so there's a nice partnership there for us in that space.
It's a great strategy, and Kubernetes is still a very complex environment. You may not have to set it up from scratch, stick build it yourself any longer, but running it at scale, managing it and optimizing is no small undertaking. That's clearly the challenge that you moved into and your expertise falls in. Well, you have StormForge optimized live, which we announced just a little bit ago. Tell us a little bit about that announcement, and then let's talk about your partnership that you just announced.
Yeah, so I'm a product guy by background. I was at Apple for a long time. I love discovery. I love kind of listening to users and customers, and um, really we try to to not build in a vacuum, which is challenging sometimes, especially as a small company when you're growing rapidly, but our customer base is still sub like 100. So it's growing, but it's we don't have a ton of a ton of customers yet. But we've been very, very hyper focused on listening to all our customers and our users on, okay, this is how you're using StormForge today. Like, what do you wish was there that isn't, and how would you really expand your engagement with StormForge from a product utilization standpoint and a value creation standpoint? And so across last year, by far the largest theme was if you could provide me a view in one platform between what's going on in pre-production and what's going on in production, I can and marry those two worlds together for me and for my developers, et cetera. That would be a game changer. And so Optimize Live pairs really nicely with our what we've always had in a pre-production environment. And it takes, again, telemetry and observability data, and it provides that kind of single view between pre-production and production. And so depending on the application, or depending on the needs or the business needs connected to those applications, we're finding that people may use one or the other or both. And then we're also seeing some interesting stuff, across teams in any given organization where, SREs might be using one part of the platform and platform teams might be using another part of the platform. And we're starting to see, quite a bit of unification taking place across teams as well within the StormForge platform, which is great to see. And so Optimize Live in particular is our production solution. It uses the same architecture and same platform, same machine learning, all of those things, but it gives me that production view on an ongoing and continuous basis. And so now I can close that loop between pre-prod and production.
Yeah, and that's exactly where my brain was going is, pre-production never matches production as much as we try, right? It's very difficult to simulate or get close to what that is. Maybe it's not possible in some cases, but it sounds like this is really going to close that gap substantially. So I know whether what I'm seeing in pre-prod are similar, if not the same, so I can have a better expectation of what the performance might be when I go to production. Totally
agree. I mean, we acquired a small performance testing and load testing company. So we have our own load tests in the platform if people don't have them, but we also integrate with all the major performance testing suites that are out there. And again, great partnership opportunity for us. But as solid as those are, one of the questions we got continuously, or one of the areas of minor pushback we got was, if I can't close this loop and validate in production that what we're simulating and scenario planning for in pre-production, then that loop is broken. And I'm kind of where I was all along. Even if, I'm very confident in the abilities of our machine learning to solve the problems we're solving, and empowering developers to be a part of that process, not automating them out of it. But you still have that psychological gap, as you said, between pre-prod and prod. And so it's really exciting to be able to close that.
Well, let's talk about your announcement. You had an announcement with AWS. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah. So we love AWS. It's been an interesting journey. We're built on AWS at StormForge. And we're super excited to announce a pretty significant and I would say very real and exciting partnership, in particular with the EKS team and group. So StormForge is now formally ISVA certified. We've got a really exciting partnership with the EKS team. And we're looking at how StormForge can come alongside existing EKS services to seamlessly, and by the way, done a lot of the work already to integrate really nicely. And so, what if you could, as a developer, go and start consuming EKS, services within AWS, and at the same time get the power of StormForge and everything we're providing, within that same experience. And so, really, really exciting. I think they view us, as really unique, but at the same time, really additive. And so, I think, we spent a bunch of time with them recently in person, just like finalizing all this, but also digging into like where that value proposition lies. And AWS sellers are now, incentivized to include StormForge, which is a big deal for us as a company. But they also view us as just providing a unique, a unique value alongside EKS and those services, which, if you think about that, drives loyalty. It drives a great user, an additive user experience for AWS users. And they are obviously, customer obsessed from the core. And so I think that there's a lot of really nice alignment between AWS and ourselves. And it's frankly really fun as a small company to be interacting with giants and being able to feel like you're providing value.
Well, and as a company in the high growth stage where you are, you can only have so many chits to put on the table and how much time you can invest in partnerships. And there's partnerships as in I'm in your directory and on your website. And there's like, I really, really am integrated into the product. It seems like, if I'm understanding correctly, what's really interesting here is that since the audience of AWS is largely developers, they're pretty developer friendly and centric. You obviously are, of course, yourself. But rather than just assembling the Lego blocks of services that I need to consume to build my apps, manage my apps, manage production, you've already done a lot of that integration, and time to value is much shorter to be able to consume that data, start to get prod and pre-prod, bring those things together, get the value that you can bring through your machine learning.
Yeah, it's exactly right. We want that kind of seamless, the ideal path to one-click kind of integration, and certainly time to value and reducing that is an obsession of ours. And how can you Kubernetes itself right now is, I would argue, is kind of disappearing. It's being abstracted away in a good way. Because it's just a part of my experience, and we view kind of the EKS plus StormForge path as similar, and if organizations can immediately get going, not only with this EKS related services they need, but with what we would call optimization by design from container or namespace number one forward. Then it puts them in an advantageous spot from the very beginning, and then over time, I think it results in ultimately, like I said, continued loyalty to AWS, consumption of further and ongoing services, and so I think everyone wins in that category.
Yeah, it seems like while Kubernetes isn't everywhere, it is kind of everywhere, certainly in a cloud native environment. Yeah. And I think I understand your point too of we're adding higher level services, doing more on top of Kubernetes or along with Kubernetes. So it's not just the main thing. It's not just the big thing. There's other things that are happening with it to bring even greater value from orchestration.
Yeah, and I think like I'm a Jeffrey Moore fan, Crossing the Chasm, and I think one of the biggest reasons I feel like that Kubernetes itself is at least bumping up against that chasm, if not moving past it, is because of things like you just described taking place, for Kubernetes. And I mean, I've said this openly: StormForge would likely not exist without Kubernetes, and it would take us a lot longer to achieve the kind of scale and growth that we're pursuing without partners like AWS and EKS, and it's neat to see that, coming together. I think even AWS saw, coming out of Google, what, Kubernetes, the adoption, the community that was growing around it, and all that. And now as the maturity takes place, and, you're looking at workloads on Kubernetes being operationalized, in major organizations, Fortune 5 in some cases, a few that we work with. And that's, it's really exciting to see.
Well, exciting news about AWS and Stormforge Optimized Live from previous announcements. I don't know if we can get a scoop on any news, but what kind of things should we look in a high growth in this stage with your company? Kind of any things as you project forward we might be able to look forward to from Stormforge?
Yeah, so I would touch on two things. One, just the platform itself. So there's just so much growth, as you said, within Kubernetes. Our goal is to continue to fit really seamlessly in the CI/CD pipeline. And so, our ideal vision is that applications are no longer released or managed on Kubernetes without, going through an optimization step, whether that's experimentation or whether that's, on an ongoing, from an observation standpoint. And so we will keep, I mentioned it earlier, but we will keep going down the stack, where we were focused at the application layer. We'll go down, the entire stack and take in traces and logs and kernel data and other pieces there to be able to continue optimizing. So that's one piece. We'll be releasing a series of things across the next quarter or two, along those lines. And then secondly, one of the other pieces is I'm super excited in a week or two, we're announcing a new board member, industry veteran comes alongside the board that we have in place today, which I'm super thankful for. Our major investor is Insight Partners, who, just announced their next and latest and greatest, fund, and just love the partnership we have with Insight and the board accordingly. But super excited to announce soon the new board member who, comes from this world and has had multiple runs at actually, growing and operating businesses. So he brings just a ton of operational experience, industry experience, and has already just been a huge benefit to me and the team. So that's another piece that we're really excited about. And then I'd say lastly, we had our best quarter ever in Q4, which is going to be, ironically, because you don't typically see a Q1 that's better than a previous Q4. But we're going to see that, for Stormforge. And, I think from a growth and customer acquisition standpoint, the timing of we raised our Series B of 63 million, knowing that we were a little early to market. And so it's exciting to see the market continuing to mature. More and more people are looking for optimization, and it's an exciting time for us to be a part of what's happening.
Timing is everything. You learn that as an entrepreneur for sure. Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Matt Provo, CEO with Stormforge. Stormforge.io is where you can find out more about Optimize Live and AWS partnership and all kinds of good information. We look forward to more coming out from you and the Stormforge team, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, Stormforge.io. You can even sign up for a 15-day free trial, get going, and check out the platform. So,
excellent. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Next up, I'm really happy to introduce our good friend Mike Jones, the Haunted Hacker. In this episode of Mike's Haunted Hacker podcast, and by the way, this is a part 1 of 2, Mike's guest is Zach M. of Cyber Defense Services, and they're really going to just talk hacker life, right? The philosophy, the psychology, success, egoist anarchism, power, happiness, personal drive. What goes on in a hacker's mind? And who better to talk about it than Mike? And in this conversation, Zach M. of Cyber Defense. So here now is part 1 of The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones.
Welcome to the Haunted Hacker podcast, version February V3.2. I've done a ton of podcasts this month. And so a little bit of news before we get started. I'll be speaking in Atlanta on March 30th for the TechStrong event, and also doing a workshop on how to hack mobile phones and showing you how to track people real time on mobile phones. Other than that, not a whole lot of news. Still waiting for Putin to make his invasion into Ukraine as U.S. jumps in the middle trying to get a grab of the natural gas pipeline over there. Once again, we're getting involved in a theater we probably don't belong in. With that being said, we have Zach on today, and his background is really, really interesting. And just his whole personality is really interesting to me, and the way he approaches cybersecurity and the industry as a whole. So without further ado, Zach, I'm glad to have you on. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hell yeah.
And
all right,
launch right into it, man. Tell us how you got into cyber and kind of what you're doing now and your vision for the future.
Well, like all people, I started tinkering with computers when I was a kid, right? Just, building Yahoo, GeoCities websites and launching exploits to kick people off of AOL Instant Messenger and all kinds of stupid shit. Just everything that people were involved in, right? Normal stuff. You could, think back then of the kind of shit that we used to do in a computer. And I really didn't have the mindset of the possibility that this could possibly be a career for me in the future. I was just tinkering with shit. And I just got really good with using computers over time because I was interested in it as a kid. And I also, had the kind of personality and intellectual mindset of taking everything apart and building everything anyway, like the mindset of an engineer, right? So I know that was my natural talent, but also people who are talented in that area are also very talented logically. So I fell into the field of philosophy, falling in love with philosophy while getting my general education in college. And I pursued the career path of a philosopher, which essentially got me involved in a lot of political activism, a lot of street activism, a lot of organizing. And when you go on that path, you become hyper aware of everything around you. When you study sociology and philosophy, you start to look at problems in a way that other people don't look at them, and you look for solutions, and you start to realize that you are trapped in a system of power structures that are battling to rob you of your autonomy, right? And I realized that's the world that I live in. And it led me down the path of philosophy, which eventually led me into cybersecurity. Because, of course, you had that whole anonymous thing at the time, being involved in all these protests and stuff like that. And me already being talented in the field of technology and knowing how to basically obfuscate my information and hide it. I was already helping activists encrypt their communications and journalists and all kinds of people essentially evade authorities from harassing them, etc. Things that an activist would do within their groups who understand and know how to manipulate and protect digital information, right? So eventually I realized that there is a career in that, which I had no idea, and it's called cybersecurity. And here is this mysterious career that I never heard of in my life that was possible with this stuff that I'm doing. And I decided to pursue that because I started to get in a lot of trouble in college. I actually got kicked out of one college because I just rose hell in ethics class and all these classes in psychology in a way that people really, they couldn't handle my debates and my arguments. I upset a lot of people. And I started to realize that the college wasn't an academic institution. It was more of like,
Programming.
we are an academic institution for people to freely express themselves and elaborate on their ideas until it causes problems, right? Or until you start to question the legitimacy of the institution itself that you're in, philosophically, economically, sociologically, then you're in trouble, right? So I realized, I said, the hell with pursuing a career path as a philosopher. I'm just going to wind up getting kicked out of a college somewhere along the lines because the philosophies I wound up falling into were extremely anti-institutional, right? I really fell into a lot of anarchist philosophy and nihilist philosophy and egoist philosophy, which seems to ring the bell with me in the way I view the world and see things. When I teach classes in cybersecurity, I often tell people, I said, to better realize your job and your standing in all of this, you're just a player in a game of social constructs where a variety of entities are battling for self-interest, money, and power. And your job is to protect their interests. What side you're on really doesn't matter. It's all the same shit, essentially, which is why I also tell people that there's really no such thing as hats. They're all a social construct, right? And I really hate the word ethical hacker. It's like ethical hacker. Okay, well, if ethics are a social construct, then I guess a black hat person, or so you label them, could also call themselves ethical by their own ethical standards, right? So they're ethical to hackers too. It's stupid. It's stupid shit. And people, I don't think they have really dove into things in the meticulous, analytic way that I have in a variety of aspects of life and academic areas that give me the hindsight that I have. I've deconstructed everything to a level to where it's just completely destroyed and there's nothing left but the little bitty logistics of it. And that's how I approach everything in life. I believe that in order to fully understand anything, you have to destroy it first. You have to destroy it logically, quite literally, in order to understand it. You have to pick it apart, right? And this allows me to navigate the landscape of society and humanity and the economy and everything else, and award myself a degree of success that other people can't quite enjoy because they don't really get it. Their mind is kind of trapped in this matrix where they have these delusional, grandiose ideas of some kind of land of lollipop and rainbows, when I see the world for what it really is. It's a fucking battlefield. Yep. Where nothing is fair, and I operate within material reality as it is, not in some delusional world of ethics and constructs. And we could go on and on. Everything is a fucking construct. I operate in reality and face what I'm looking at with an attitude as it is what it is. Like there was somebody bitching about corporations the other day on LinkedIn about how they don't pay them enough. And I'm like, of course they're not going to pay you enough. They have a for-profit shareholder model where they have to appease their shareholders. You live in a capitalist society, and this is how they do business. They don't have any interest in paying you fairly because they have to profit off your labor, which is why they take more than what you're worth. If you're putting in $200,000 a year of effort into a company, they're going to take most of that and maybe give you like 40 a year for your little security analyst gig or whatever it is. And that's how it works. They don't have any self-interest in giving you what you demand. And instead of bitching about, corporations give me a living wage, or the government give me this, or society give me this, I decided to take matters into my own hand. And I said, you know what, fuck all this. The only way that I'm going to survive and I'm going to flourish in this society is if I become as self-sufficient as fucking possible.
Yep.
Because nobody's going to help me. Nobody's going to save me. The government isn't going to save me. The economy isn't going to save me. Other people aren't going to save me. I'm on my own, right? So I decided from a very young age to essentially isolate myself from anybody and anyone who was a threat to my self-interest, to preserve myself and to grow as an individual. And that started very early on with me essentially leaving both sides of my family, later on leaving tons of friends, leading to the moment that we are here, where I built the van, left everything I know to pursue my dream. And my current goal is to achieve a state of being where I am at or near my maximum potential. And for people who are very talented, like us, people like me and you, the biggest crime of all would be for you to die without achieving your maximum potential. And this society of constructs that we live in, all of them act as a way to enslave the individual from realizing their full potential. Like, you're told that you owe something to humanity. You owe something to society. You owe something to your parents. Even though you didn't choose to be born, they decided to have you themselves, right? I've broken down all these things into complete nonsense. The only thing that's real is me, the individual, trying to free myself in the absolute most best efficient way possible that would allow me to escape the negative side effects that this society and this world and this structure of power entities playing their games. I want to escape that.
Yeah,
and that's the problem, is that people don't see that. And also, a lot of people will ask me, how do you do this, Zach? Hey, well, you can't be lazy. Like, you have to be willing to put in the work. All day I've been wiring new cloud devices inside, I'm inside my van right now. I'm wiring lighting. I'm expanding my solar system. I'm soldering. There's a lot of things that I've learned as an individual, tons and tons of skills I've picked up. Like I said in previous podcasts, welding, carpentry, sociology, philosophy, academic fields, psychology, everything. It's massive. The more knowledge you have, the more confidence you have. The more confidence you have, the more skills you obtain. The more skills you obtain, the more you can do shit yourself. And if I continue to do shit myself, then I no longer need the system for whatever the hell it's trying to sell me. And that's my goal. And the goal of my company is to help people become as self-sufficient as possible, which is why, like, if we do things, we equally split, the winnings and whatnot. I don't need to worry about profit margins or anything else. It's just a self-sustaining organization that is built upon a decentralized network of talented individuals that is growing rapidly. I mean, my server has over 300 people in it. I don't give a shit what anyone says. I know what I'm doing is right, and I know people are loving it, right? And that's it. Go ahead. Let me get you let you get in a few words there. Because I'll talk your ass off forever, man. Like,
I'm totally fascinated. And the reason why I am is because our backgrounds are very similar. So I've gone to, I tried to buy into the whole institution idea when I was younger. I went into the military. I went to college. I did the things I thought I was supposed to do until I figured out that it was all bullshit. And when I started breaking down what was going on, it's like people are just blindly going through life and they just accept what's going on around them. They don't question it. They don't try to understand it. and it drove me nuts. I ended up leaving the military. And during my whole life, like I've been a big reader, and I've always studied really hard on my own just for independent purposes. And I got into psychology because I wanted to know why I thought the way that I did, because I felt like I thought different from everybody else. And I came to a lot of realizations. And part of that was understanding, the fundamental psychology behind a human being and what drives us and what motivates us. And when I extracted myself out of the situation and started looking at government, started looking at powerful people and looking at their psychology, the way they thought and the way they thought of themselves, their own inner, ID, it was fucking scary. And the more that went on, and I started seeing things from a different view, and I realized that 1% who governs, most of the world doesn't give a shit about us at all. They want us to continue moving along the way that we do so that they can continue reaping the benefits and holding some sort of, pseudo obedience, but that really triggered a lot of things. You talked about anarchy and hacktivism and activism, and those all ring really true. And even in the current situation, looking at geopolitics, I'm a big fan of geopolitics, and I like to dive right into it and find the basis of why people do the things they do. And, take Russia, for instance, right now, and Ukraine and the U.S. getting involved. They're not getting involved because it's a humanitarian effort. There's things to be had. It's a capitalist society. There's some sort of resource they're after. In Iraq and Afghanistan, there were natural resources there that they wanted, plus strategic access. In the Ukraine, there's a major natural gas pipeline. They want a percentage of that. And people, when I explain to them that war reparations is a legitimate thing, when the U.S. gets done with the war, there's war reparations to be paid. And part of that for Iraq was percentage of that pipeline. And so I really studied geopolitics. I try to study all the major dictators in history, talking about Stalin, some of those guys. There's lessons to be learned, and looking at the way that they viewed the world and the way that they viewed power and how to gain power, you can kind of pick up on those things. And we deal with it in our own industry as well. The same psychology doesn't escape, out of politics or out of, institutions like academia, but it's everywhere. That same type of construct that you're talking about actually rules and maintains the cybersecurity industry as well. You look at the major players and the money that they make, and the way that they treat people, and that's kind of been my platform for the past year was, we need to get away from looking at people as numbers or looking at people as a role or a job rec. I mean, people have lives, and until we can treat people like humans and have relationships, meaningful relationships between coworkers and bosses and executives, we're not going to get anywhere. We're still going to be running after the dollar, and nothing's going to be cohesive. And they're constantly going to be battling the rotational door of employees because nobody wants to be treated like a number or a rec. But I totally get what you're saying. And what's really cool is the fact that for the past year, I came back to the U.S. last year and was literally homeless and lost everything. I had no job, I had no money, I had no place to go. Right in the middle of the pandemic, I ended up catching COVID, being put in the hospital as someone who's homeless, and ended up going to a friend of mine's house to recover in Alabama. And the time I was there, I minimized my life down to things I didn't need. Got rid of all of the stuff that I consider baggage, and really focused on learning and getting my voice out there and helping people get their voice out there. And to me, that paid me more dividends than, going to work for a big corporation. And we would sit around the bar in Alabama and talk about getting off the grid. We started setting up, ham radio relays and stuff like that. And my buddy was looking at modding out his truck and just finding ways to abstract ourselves from what was going on. Because in my view, when you look at empires throughout history, and I talk about this a lot, there's a cyclic event cycle for empires. And it's usually about 254 years and they start collapsing on themselves. And we're about at that 254 mark. I mean, 2030 will be that 254. And when you look at the degradation of society in the U.S. and, everything with this mask mandate and the shots and all this stuff, we're starting to, corrode at the center, at the core. And you look at the corruption on every level, and not only just government, but companies and entities and people who manage conferences and stuff like that. You look at the corruption on that level, and it's everywhere. Like, I don't know what's wrong with society in general, but it seems like the world in general is just starting to decay from the inside. And I'd like to get people who are passionate about that to get their voices out and to be heard, because I think it's really important. Most people walk around blinders on. And as long as they can get, their Starbucks in the morning and they can go shop at Target after work, they don't give a shit what goes on outside that little microcosm. And that disturbs me, because as they're walking around blindly, there's people abusing, their rights, their freedoms. You look at government operations and stuff like, the Havana syndrome coming from Cuba and those types of weapons are being developed. And there's a war that goes on outside the view of mainstream, and people don't take a chance and a shot to look into that and try to understand it. But I think if we get enough word out to people who really care and they start waking up, I think that things in our world will be a lot different. And I really like what you said about hats, right? And the whole ethical hacker term. I think we were both around way before the certification ethical hacker came out. From EC Council, and I blame that on them. They termed that certification ethical hacking. It really confused me. I was like, first of all, they're taking something that the media makes, demonizes people for, and they're
they have to do that because the corporations, they create these zing words because there has to be this good guy, bad guy dichotomy in order to keep this thing running. And what I tell people is I say, first of all, morality is a construct, right? It doesn't exist in physical reality or manifest itself in our physical reality anyway. If you were to point to me where morality is, you can't find it. It's a byproduct of your emotions in your brain and you signaling off of other people. And it gives us a sense of human behavior that's congruent to our survival, right? That's what morality is. But it's not mandatory, and it's, like I said, it's a construct. It's not a concrete object, right? So when you are looking at this good guy, bad guy dichotomy of the bad hacker and the good hacker, I would challenge someone to remove morality from the equation to better understand what's going on, because it's a construct. Just remove good or bad from the equation. And just see that there are two people engaging in a power play to basically try to obtain what is their self-interest. And that's it. And that's how you really understand attackers and people and what's going on, is you have to remove all these constructs. Another thing that I realize about you is that's very vastly different from me, is that I think a lot of people get wrong is I think that you're more of an idealist than I am. I don't worry myself about politics. I don't give a shit about them. I don't worry about the well-being or welfare of humanity. I don't think that there's going to be some kind of revolutionary ideal where everybody's uniting under one banner. It's not possible. It's not real. If there's a revolution, my revolution for myself began a long time ago, and I would challenge people to liberate themselves as far as they can. And understand that it's not your job to liberate other people, because their limits are not necessarily yours. So I've given up on this idealism of humanity and world peace and all these delusions that are not realistic a very long time ago. The only possibility that does exist is creating groups of individuals that have your similar self-interest in mind and creating the best world possible for you and that group. That's it. And when it comes to power, the only thing that really matters in this life, if you think about it, is power. You as an individual should try to obtain as much power as possible, because the more you have, the more you can free yourself from anything that seeks to stop you from attaining your self-interest. For example, we could look at another thing like human rights, or whatever you claim your rights are. Rights are a construct. They don't exist. They exist on paper, but you could say that you have the right to speak, or you have the right to live, or whatever you claim you have the right to do. You could claim that all day. But at the end of the day, if an entity comes along that decides that you're dead, or that you don't want to speak no more, and they have more power than you, there goes your rights, right? So what you really should be concerned in society, if you want to get your all out of this world, is getting yourself as much power as you possibly fucking can. And that's what I'm absolutely obsessed over. Now, there's two different types of people that seek power. There's, and this is the example I like to give. There's people that seek power to liberate themselves from the outside world around them that seeks to force their power upon them and rob them of autonomy. And there's individuals that seek power because they want to abuse and exploit others, right? So the type of person that I am is I seek power to liberate myself and liberate others around me. And I use my power to pick up stones and move them in a way that is congruent towards making myself further autonomous. And as a side effect, it ripples to the people around me or participate in my undertakings. That's the way I look at things. I don't have a hunky-dory idealistic vision in the world of some kind of feel-good, let's hold hands, energies, kumbaya, whatever bullshit that a lot of people have. I don't know what to tell people when it comes to that. There's a lot of people that approach me that think that I'm like that, but I'm not. I'm very, very realistic to a point where if I have a philosophical conversation with somebody, I'll slowly start to see their hope and their dreams and their aspirations just like sink out of their eyes as I throw them into this abyss. It's like I'm sucking their soul out and revealing to them the ugly, harsh truth to the world that they didn't want to see, that getting ahead requires hard work, that everything is against them, that nothing is fair, and the only way they're going to get out of this is by doing it themselves. And they can beg and cry and scream and whatever the fuck it is that they want to do. But at the end of the day, you're one person in a world of geopolitics, like you said, that you have no control over. So I don't give a shit about things that I don't have control over. I don't worry about them. I don't give a fuck what Joe Schmo is doing down the block. I don't give a shit what Putin is doing. I don't care what the government is doing. If it's not affecting me, I'm not really concerned with it. I just always did my own thing. Yeah. That's what I did. Whatever other people are doing, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't care. I just do my own thing. And if you stick to your own guns and do your own thing and focus on yourself 100%, then you will find yourself eventually in a place where the negative aspects of society are not affecting you anymore, right? I spent a lot of my time studying capitalism, how it works, economics. I don't care if you support capitalism or not. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, I don't give a fuck if you support it or not. You're in it. You need to learn how it works if you're going to get yourself fucking money. Hello. It is what it is. And I deal with things as it is what it is. And that's it. I'm not trying to change. Even when I say things like, I want to change the world, I think to myself, change the world or change my world?
Yeah, exactly.
The world of the people who have the same self-interest as me, right? I don't think that people really think about shit like this.
No.
Or that things like I said, like humanity and society is a construct that you owe absolutely nothing to. You don't owe anybody shit except who you have it in your self-interest to owe, right? Just like when I talked about the taboo of you not owing your parents something. That's actually really big right now. If you bring a dog into your house, do you yell at it when it barks at you because it's hungry? No. because you brought it there and it's relying on you. So why would you essentially like owe your parents for birthing you when you didn't choose? Like they have the obligation to take care of you now. Like you're helpless, little child baby thing, right? It's the same thing. And it's the same thing with society and humanity. You didn't choose to be here. You don't owe anything to it. And essentially, it may not be in your interest to owe a society or contribute to a humanity that you yourself would find toxic to the individual. Right. Maybe you should build something that has the end goal of contributing to a new society, a new alternate society where people do things differently, right? And this is where we get into things that I would like to call like dual power structures that compete for legitimacy. And that's what I've built. My organization is a dual power structure. It's competing for legitimacy against other classical corporations that revolve around the hierarchical for-profit shareholder model. I have more of like a decentralized, horizontal organization that is more realistic in terms of serving human interest and is human-centered. Now, did I make the organization human-centered and serving human interests because that was my goal from the forefront? No. It's just that I think it's more efficient, right? I'm not the kind of person that does things because it's like, I want people to feel good, give them a warm hug. Anything I do, it's because I think it's more efficient. I wasn't even thinking about whether the organization is human-centered or not, or serves humans better or treats them better than corporations does. It's just that me being obsessed with efficiency just so happens to be that a human-centered organization that cares more about people is more efficient.
Right.
And that's the path I took, right? That's what I'm really concerned about is efficiency. Is this going to give me what I want? And every decision I make, I think to myself, is this going to give me what I want? And that's another problem that people do is they don't put themselves first. They're full of excuses. Oh, I can't do this because I got to take care of my sick grandma or whatever. That's great. Well, then, stay where you are for the rest of your life. Like, what can I tell you? You either leave your sick grandma and have her take care of herself, or you go and accomplish your dreams. People don't want to deal with this shit, right? Right. Or it's just so many excuses. It just makes me angry and frustrated. And then there'll be people that they message me and they say, I'm not all about the money, like you are, Zach. And I said, okay, then what are you about? And they go, well, I like to help people. And I go, well, can a billionaire change the world in a heartbeat if he wants to? Like, don't you fucking get it?
Right.
Don't you fucking understand? Like, are you stupid or what? And a lot of people, I just think, quite frankly, a lot of people are stupid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of people.
What can I say?
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Next up, we're going to go for something old. We're going all the way back to Predict 2022. It wasn't all the way back. It was just mid-January. But in this episode, or in this segment from 2022 Predict, we're going to be talking about career paths in cybersecurity. As I mentioned earlier, it's probably one of the most popular questions we get from the audience around cyber. And in this session to Predict, it was Mark Miller, who's now VP Community at Linux Foundation, and Jasmine Henry, Field Security Director at Jupiter One. All of the Predict sessions, by the way, are available on demand. You can go check them out, and I recommend you do. There were some fantastic sessions there. But here's Mark and Jasmine from Predict 2022 on career paths in cybersecurity.
Hi, I'm Mark Miller here with Jasmine Henry, and we're going to be talking about career paths when it comes to cybersecurity. So, Jasmine, you and I have talked about this for quite a bit, right? How did this first come about when we first started talking about it?
I was trying to remember that this morning, Mark. I think that I was sharing, kind of a great resource that I've used quite a bit to talk to folks who are breaking into cyber, undergrads, people from different backgrounds who are pursuing careers in security.
Yeah, it's the idea of the InfoSec wheel. Let's pull that up right away so we can know what we're talking about here. So career paths in cybersecurity. First of all, Jasmine, let's say a little bit about ourselves. Why don't you tell people about yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Jasmine Henry. I am the Field Security Director at Jupiter One, and I have spent the last few years in kind of a security leadership role at cloud-native software startups, creating and scaling security programs. My background is in analytics, and I have a lot of background in kind of cloud-native program management and security analysis as well. How about you, Mark?
How about me? Some people might know me as the co-founder of All Day DevOps. Also, I produced the DevSecOps track days with Alan Schimmel and TechStrong at the RSA conference, which is kind of fun. And I am the senior content director for Jupiter One. And I think that's how you and I started working together, trying to figure out in general the cybersecurity field. And that's where this idea of the wheel came in. Now, this isn't something that you and I created. How did this, who actually generated this wheel? Jen?
Right. Absolutely. I take no credit for this wheel. I just really feel that it's a valuable resource. So the wheel kind of originated at Black Hat in 2017 when April C. Wright, who has been a significant figure in the security community for a number of years, gave a talk about how the builders, which is developers, engineers, are an important part of security. And about 3 years later in 2020, Louis C. Kremen on his website Hacker Noon kind of really formalized that idea and put forth this InfoSec wheel resource to illustrate ways that security has many more paths and many more critical paths than just the kind of blue team and red team that we always think of.
That's actually where this presentation came from, is that you and I were talking and said, could we use this wheel to kind of help people visualize what the various roles in cybersecurity are? And that's where this presentation came from. So let's start working through these various personas that we've got up here. Let's start with the red one. A lot of people, I think, have heard about red and blue teams. They've heard about them, but we need clarification on what does each of these teams do. So, Jasmine, let's start with the red team.
Sure. Yeah, I think that red team is often a career path that people who are thinking about breaking into cybersecurity are pretty interested in. Red team is the penetration testers or pen testers. They're the breakers. Their goal is to identify points of vulnerability in an infrastructure, which they may do through manual or automated pen testing. And the value that they provide to the organization is that they give the defenders experience dealing with real world style attacks in a slightly more controlled environment. Some of the job titles you often see here are pen tester, ethical hacker. I do see some jobs posted under red team as well. Red team engineer is another job title that I see.
The thing I would consider as I'm looking at this too, Jasmine, is this a potential for a consulting career? Could somebody say, I'm going to put together a red team company?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is a number of consulting roles at security consultancies, audit firms, pen test as a service firms as well is, something that we're seeing growing. A lot of compliance frameworks have a requirement that whoever does these kind of penetration tests needs to be completely objective. They can't know what's in the infrastructure that they're testing, because if you're testing something you've built yourself, you are going to have some bias in how you're running that test. So outsourcing tests is very common, and so consulting is a pretty common career path for red teamers for sure.
The red teams, are they in? How do you say it? Are they competing against blue teams when we think of it in this sense?
Are you asking about in reality or ideally?
Yeah, in reality. I mean, if a red team is going up against somebody, are they going up against the blue team who's trying to defend what they're doing?
Yes. There is naturally a point of tension, and something that Louis C. Cramden and countless others have addressed is that in real world scenarios, it can boil over, as can happen when you have any two teams with completely opposite goals. So typically the red team is testing the infrastructure that the blue team is responsible for securing. These are the defenders, and their goal is damage control, especially against real world adversaries and threat actors.
When we're talking about damage control, for me, I immediately go to PR. I mean, there's the external damage control versus the damage control of the system, right?
That's a really good point. There's studies on the cost of a data breach. Reputational damage is huge. It takes years to clean up. And so I think that's a really good point that there is a lot of roles in kind of defense and response that are not terribly technical at all when it comes to reputation, PR, cleanup, monitoring, impact on customer churn, all of those things. Cleanup can really be a cross-functional effort.
When I'm looking at this too, and each of these personas, as we're looking at them, Jasmine, one of the things I would think of is, if I was thinking of this position, what should my background be? You've got the common certs at the bottom, but what kind of background would be a defender?
I put certs in just because I think it is a common question. And I think that certs are important, but I don't think it's the only thing that the candidates need to bring to the table. And I think that for entry-level roles, certs are not always necessary. But backgrounds for blue team can be incredibly varied. I was telling you earlier today about how I heard about a gentleman recently who became a security analyst, and his background was being a small business owner of a pool business. Computer science is a common background. There's an increasing number of degree programs in cybersecurity. A lot of folks from military backgrounds will kind of pursue the security operations center analyst blue team role. And that can be both kind of military intelligence as well as we actually have a colleague who's from kind of military network background. And then I also have definitely worked with folks, multiple folks. I've had multiple mentees from medical backgrounds, a nurse and a pharmacist who made the switch to blue team, as well as folks from humanities, because a lot of the kind of digital forensics incident response research involves dealing with a lot of information. There's several notable information security professionals in the blue team research capacity who come from library science backgrounds, because that is a kind of a domain and a pathway where folks really know how to do some research.
I think one of the things that a lot of people thinking about a career path want to know here with cybersecurity career paths is, does experience trump, I wouldn't say education, but certification? Where do you stand on that?
I think that I am, well, okay. I think that I am probably, in terms of the hiring I've done in the past, I think that certs should not be a requirement for entry-level employees. If you're hiring somebody who's mid-level, senior level, that might be a different conversation. But it should not be an expectation for entry-level hires. I think that if you're coming from a non-traditional background where perhaps you don't have a degree, certs may kind of enhance your candidacy. So I think it really depends on the candidate, where they're applying to, and the level that they're applying to as well. But one thing I will say is that if you don't have certs, you can't afford to get certs and it's stressing you out, don't be too hard on yourself, because it is very much a job seeker's market. And I think that with the current skills shortage, more and more employers are recognizing that they cannot ask for mid-level certifications for an entry-level hire.
I think that one of the things that I look at too is this a personality that's willing to learn?
Yeah.
Right.
Point.
So that, as you said, if I can get the right person who fits in with the team and the culture of the team, I can educate them to the way I need them to work on the team.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't teach culture integration.
That's a really good point. And I think that there is a lot of different ways to demonstrate that you are able to learn. And, certs that cost $900 are not the only way. There is certs that cost significantly less, and free certs that you can take as well if you want to kind of just really demonstrate that you're somebody who can learn and continuously improve.
There you go. Next one, Purple Team. I kind of dressed this guy up so that he could look like he's a counselor.
He looks like a 1970s kind of glam rocker to me. That's great.
So when we're looking at this, maximize red and blue teams, what does that mean?
Well, I think that they are making sure that red team's findings from vulnerability scans, from pen tests, are kind of being put into practice. Are we learning as much as we can from our testing and applying it to our infrastructure? Are we applying it quickly? Are we applying it continuously? So they're kind of operationalizing that tension between the blue and red team to continuously improve the company's security posture.
And what kind of personality would fit into a role like this?
Well, I think that it's going to be somebody curious, because they need to know at least a little bit, really a lot, about both blue and red teaming tactics. It's typically, and not always, but it might often be somebody who enjoys cross-functional collaboration. It could be a people person as well, because I don't know how often they'd really need to actively referee, between blue and red team, but it's, constantly being that kind of counselor.
It seems to me that this is an experienced position. As you said, they're going to have to understand red and blue teams, and not just that, but actually the environment that they're dealing with at the time. So to me, as a career choice, This is something you work into. It's not something that you just jump into.
Yep. I think that's largely true. I think that a lot of people who take on a purple team role have at least a couple years experience in either red or blue or both domains. But I've also seen some people who have really built a remarkable amount of experience quickly. I've seen people who are working in a blue team role and they know they want to be a red teamer. So they spend a lot of time kind of after hours doing things like hack the box to build that experience. So I think that, there's a lot of different ways to get to a point where you're familiar enough with both sides of the coin to be a purple teamer. And it may be one of those things where both knowledge and kind of personality matters. Could you ever see yourself being a purple teamer, Mark?
No.
I love that blunt answer.
As we're talking about this type of thing, you just said hack the box. It reminded me that part of gaining experience too can be done through hack the box, events.
Yes.
That can be done through capture the flag events so that you can show your chops.
Yes, absolutely. I hired a red teamer a while back who had a computer science degree. He was working as kind of like a site reliability engineer, and he built a ton of experience on Hack the Box. And a lot of that experience he built was through their free plans. I think that there's an incredible amount you can do without having to pay.
Yellow team, the builders.
This is where it all started.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about when I first started. I think I started building back in 1996. I built a ticketing system for theaters in London. I built a travel site, that kind of stuff. And you start off as a builder like that, having fun, and you're building stuff. At that time, we weren't thinking about security at all. That wasn't even part of the picture. You just go download some scripts and just go to town. So in this case, I think the builders are a whole different ballgame than when you and I first started.
Are they? I mean, did you ever deploy anything? And I'm not saying you personally. Perhaps you one time knew a developer who deployed something that didn't quite work as expected in operations.
Can't say that I have.
I think that there has been increasingly, enormous discovery among organizations over the last couple decades as we get to a point where every organization is competing on technology, that rework is really expensive. If you deploy something and it's not what you need, it's not secure, it doesn't work. It works inconsistently. The customers hate it. Any reason that leads to rework is significantly more expensive than getting it right the first time.
There's no doubt about that. There's been so much stuff. And I mean, Gene Kim and his whole conference at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, half the sessions are on that the waste of time on rework, the waste of resources, not just that, but you get mental fatigue when you're doing that. The big thing for me on the rework too is that once you put something over and it's in production, you're on to something else. And if somebody comes back to you a month later and says, "Oh, we've got to go you're in a whole different mental space."
Yikes. Well, I think what I've seen over the last, 2.5 years, Mark, is that COVID-19 has really kind of almost put product teams in a pressure cooker. At the onset of COVID-19, you had the healthcare industry, they were standing up telemedicine overnight. Countless other industries were having to figure out how to do transactions completely remotely, launch new apps that, they didn't want to launch this month. They wanted to launch it in 6 months, but it was a necessity for the business to operate. So more than ever before, perhaps, I think there's a lot of pressure on product teams to get things out the door quickly before the competitor does. And the industry is really having to figure out how to embed security into the software lifecycle.
That's right. What about the deployers? These are the guys that we used to think of, we're going to throw it over the wall and these guys are going to do it.
Mark, you've got a lot of context with the DevSecOps SRE space. What is some of your experience with, kind of the goals and value and job titles that a green team deployer might have?
I think more than anything else, Jasmine, I think of context when we think of deploying and what's happening. It used to be that when the developers were done, the builders were done, literally just throw it over the wall and it's the deployer's responsibility to deploy this thing into production. And it then became their headache. What we're seeing now is the advent of not cross roles, but cross teams. And as we're talking about these careers that you and I are looking at here, the 7 things that we're going to look at, it's almost as if when you start thinking about putting a team together, you almost want one of each of these guys on your team.
I think so. And I think that you actually might need a lot of yellow teamers.
Sure.
You really want somebody who's an expert in secure code on every single one of your kind of autonomous, self-organizing DevOps teams.
What kind of personality is the green team? Meaning aggressive, laid back? I mean, do we have a specific, when I'm
oh my gosh. Well, what kind of personality gravitates towards DevSecOps? I feel like I've known some really great DevSecOps and SRE engineers in my life, and I feel like they are some of the smartest, hardest working people I know.
That's what I was actually going to use that word too. These are really smart people.
Yep. And I feel like a lot of great DevSecOps engineers like the challenge. You know, if they hear that they're going to deploy something at just massive, impossible scale, if you give them a problem that sounds pretty much impossible to solve, they're going to get excited because they love really hard puzzles.
Yeah, you tell somebody you can't do something, that's just a red flag.
Right.
This is something I don't think a lot of people think about, but it is absolutely critical in the roles for thinking about cybersecurity. And we're talking much more, right, than teaching people not to click on links. The whole educational process is become critical to making things work properly.
Absolutely. Huge amount of security is concerned with human behavior, which is a lever that is notoriously hard to shift. I had a mentor a long time ago that said humans are the biggest piece of malware on your network. So the Orange team is concerned with educating and training, and it's increasingly not about check the box training. Did you do your 15 minutes this year to pass your audits? It's about starting conversations between the right folks and facilitating awareness using a broad mixture of methods. These can be folks who come up from educator, instructor backgrounds, knowledge management, information science. Typically going to be people persons and communicators.
Yeah, this is how I actually started my career in 1996, is if you get a week ahead of the crowd, then you turn around and you start teaching the crowd. It's actually, I was actually had the privilege, I was teaching at Hewlett Packard, SGI, Autodesk, all the main guys in the area down there. And one of the things that I learned along the way is the more that you teach, the more you start to understand the subject. And that sounds weird because most of the time we think the teacher already knows everything, and it's not. Educators are learners in real time.
Yeah. Well, I think that teaching and learning, security is a diverse field, and becoming more diverse. And I think that we obviously need to foster a great deal more diversity in the field. But many security people enjoy learning. They enjoy teaching. They enjoy knowledge. And I think that is important in such a fast changing field. And, really quick, Mark, I think that the current kind of job market has had an interesting impact on Orange teams. Employee engagement's pretty low. I read a study recently that 50% of employees did not feel supported by their organization during COVID. Voluntary turnover is really high, and that means that organizational knowledge is really low. People who know best practices, how to use systems, what is normal are leaving organizations, and so there's a higher risk of mistakes that can impact security. If employers are really, really unhappy, there's a risk of sabotage. So I think that organizations over the next year really need to double down on training and really be inventive about the ways that they're delivering training.
Yes, that's astute of you. Finally, we get to the white team, the managers. If you look at the color wheel, literally the managers section, the white team, is in the center of the wheel and it touches all other 6 categories. Let's talk about experience here. Personally, I don't think that at this level, this is an entry-level position. You've got to have your fingers in all the pies to understand what's going on.
I think that the white team, which I kind of address, later in the predictions, I think the white team is eventually going to need to split up into multiple more color slices, because I think that managers and compliance are increasingly different things. CISOs are definitely held responsible for passing audits for compliance, but there's a lot of compliance roles that can be entry level. Policy author, policy editor, audit coordinator are actually fantastic entry level opportunities for individuals from humanities backgrounds.
Nice. So you talked a little bit about where we're going here. So we've laid out the 7 different personas, the seven types of career paths as we're talking about. But how do you get experience on those? And we're going to have to go through these kind of quickly because it's a word wall and we've got limited time here. But give me some standout points on this one.
Sure. So join conferences. There's a lot of free security conferences year round. Mm-hmm. Capture the flag competitions and communities. I would say pick a few that you can become a, full member of a volunteer at, because that's where you build the relationships. Don't try to do everything poorly. Do a few things well. Build a GitHub portfolio and put it on your resume. It's okay if you're just starting coding. I know some brilliant security practitioners who coding is not their focus, and they have templates and articles on their GitHub portfolios. And I feel like that is so brilliant. Couple standouts from you, Mark?
The big one for me is, and it's the one I base my career on, teach, speak, and mentor. The idea that you can actually help the next generation of cybersecurity people come up. And this is talking to the converted now, the people that are already in the industry. Find people who need your help and help them out. I think that's huge. On the don't do this side, it's the final one. Don't give up. Don't give up.
Yeah. It can take a long time to break into security. I've got a bullet point about be kind to yourself. When I was 23, 24 years old, my job title was program manager. I wanted a job title that was security, and I didn't have it, and I felt like I was failing. But I was building experience because I was, managing cloud native. I was essentially a program manager for yellow teams. And I didn't realize at the time how relevant what I was doing was to future security work.
Excellent. So I'm hoping that this actually gets people excited about the different career paths and they can self-identify. Mm-hmm. The slides are going to be available to everybody. So we're going through the ones that have a lot of information on them relatively quickly. You got 5 things here, Jasmine. What's the standout here that you wanted people to take away here?
I think that if I were to summarize it into one bullet point instead of 5, I say that the white team needs reinvention, which is true, but I think that we need to reinvent the ways that we're thinking and talking about these career paths. Historically, compliance it had a reputation as, it's non-technical work. But in these vast cloud native environments, that's not true. It's not kind. I don't think it's helpful to categorize paths as technical or non-technical. I think that all paths are valid and important. And in order to solve the security problems of tomorrow, we need individuals from all backgrounds.
Thanks for the discussion. Let's start there. I always love talking to you. It's so fun. If you like what you saw here, send an email to slides@jupiter1.com and we'll make sure that you get a copy of this deck. We have extensive notes inside the deck too as part of the deck, so that when you get that sent to you, you'll be able to remember the conversation along with this. So thank you so much. That's from me, Mark, and from Jasmine.
Thank you, Mark.
We're looking forward to seeing you in real time as things start to open up again in 2022. So if you see either of us out on the conference speaker circuit, which you probably will, if you go to conferences. Please come up and introduce yourself and say hello. We love to talk about what we're doing. We love to talk about what you're doing. Jasmine, final words from you?
I think you said it, Mark. I really appreciate you facilitating this talk. And I am very much looking forward to a mix of virtual and in-person events over the next year. And, kind of watching this amazing next generation of security professionals start to make a huge impact on the industry.
All right. Thank you from us. Thank you for TechStrong for putting this on for us. Please enjoy the rest of the conference, and we look forward to seeing you in person in 2022.
Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at what AI Ops means for site reliability engineers. AI Ops can help with automating complex workflows and troubleshooting processes, which could make SREs' lives much easier. Alternatively, though, SREs may think of AI Ops as just a fancy buzzword that doesn't live up to its promises, and that can become a distraction from the SRE tools that really matter. So which perspective is right? Should SREs embrace AI Ops with open arms, or should they resist marketers' efforts to position AI Ops as the latest, greatest tooling innovation in the IT industry? Those are subjective questions that we can't answer definitively, but this article offers up some perspective by examining what AI Ops means for SREs. The short answer is AI won't replace SREs, but it can help them do their jobs better. And we have an article about managing endpoint compliance as code. Compliance as code is required for organizations today that need security as a fundamental part of business processes. It is no longer possible to manually manage compliance with dedicated security teams. Balancing security with growing infrastructure means IT and security are non-negotiable. There is no room for more uncomfortable trade-offs between risk and an organization's ability to deliver market-ready solutions quickly and efficiently. Complying with growing security and compliance regulations today is a constant challenge that affects all organizations, large and small. Organizations are implementing automated solutions to eliminate reliance on traditional, slow, error-prone manual processes because of tighter regulations in the industry and more risks associated with security attacks and compliance violations. This article looks at the importance of compliance as code as a way to enforce a comprehensive compliance strategy that involves a robust set of controls. All right, over on Container Journal, we look at why more cloud-native companies should support open source projects. Yes, open source software makes up the bedrock of our digital lives. And naturally, it is the foundation for most modern cloud-native infrastructure. In fact, a recent report from the CNCF found a rise in open source projects to support the cloud-native movement. The CNCF studies found that 96% of organizations now utilize Kubernetes. And in the past year, other cloud-native open source projects have grown exponentially as well. A full 90% of enterprises now use open source in their applications. But in the wake of incidents like Log4j, all this reliance on open source for cloud-native architecture has some worrying whether we can trust the security and reliability of these projects. Still, the benefits of open source greatly outweigh any potential concerns. This article points to some specific actions companies can take to nurture the OSS they rely so heavily upon. Over on Security Boulevard, we have another look at some of the issues of securing cloud environments. Cloud adoption today is mainstream across business operations. In 2021, nearly half of corporate data was stored in the cloud. That's according to Statista. But what's keeping companies from an even higher rate of cloud migration and adoption is the same old issue as it was a decade before: security worries. According to a study from Confluera, while almost all respondents said they want to expand cloud deployments, 2/3 said the biggest obstacle for that move is threats specifically targeting the cloud. This article looks at why cybersecurity remains an obstacle to more widespread cloud adoption and ways in which organizations can move beyond their current cloud security mindset to embrace the benefits of the cloud and push adoption to a much greater degree. And finally, we look at how security can keep pace as IT and OT converge. The IoT is rapidly maturing, and we are seeing new use cases emerge every single day. But the rise of IoT, or Internet of Things, is putting a new focus on operational technology, or OT, and that means security should be taking center stage. For cybersecurity teams looking to safeguard their users, customers, and data, their organizations must manage not only IT, but also IT security, OT security, which presents several specific new challenges that aren't usually associated with IT security, but are nonetheless important. This article outlines some of the issues surrounding IoT security and the added strain from operational technologies, and how organizations can best achieve security by using a centralized and consistent approach. All right, that's it for the headlines. Please check back with me tomorrow when I will have some more for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. Please, whatever you do, stay safe.
All right, everyone. That was great session from back in Predict. Next, we're going to turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon at the news desk. And Charlene has today's headlines, as well as a fantastic webinar preview of the great webinars we have in store this week. And Charlene also has an interview with Bhagwat Swaroop, who's the president and GM of One Identity, about challenges all of us are having around identity and access control in cloud environments. Here now, Charlene O'Hanlon.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechstrongTV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Bhagwat Swaroop, who is the president and general manager over at One Identity. Bhagwat, thank you so much for coming back to TechstrongTV. I know we spoke last year, and so it's great to have you back.
Thank you, Charlene. It's always a great conversation, and really happy to talk about exciting stuff you're doing in identities.
Yeah. So I'm especially keen to speak with you about secure management of identity and access, or secure management of identity and access in the cloud. That's easy for me to say. I can't believe I tripped over that. But yeah, it's a topic that I think a lot of organizations are still very much struggling with, even a year or even 2 years after adopting cloud services as the result of the pandemic and their digital transformation efforts. I mean, obviously, there were a lot of companies that were using the cloud beforehand, but certainly not to the extent that they're using it today. So, it's I guess we can kind of chalk it up to growing pains.
Yeah, that's a great question, Charlene. I mean, let's start out by looking at some of the trends over the last few years. Digital acceleration and move to cloud, or rather rapid adoption of public cloud, has resulted in a few things. One is it has been the underpinnings of enabling remote access and remote work from everywhere. I guess we call it work now, right? Second thing really is that it has also resulted in expansion of attack surface, so to speak. And the reality is the number of digital identities organizations are managing was on a secular trend to go up. And with this rapid adoption of cloud, it has gone up by multiple factors of that, right? One of our recent surveys pointed out that 84% of respondents said the number of identities they're managing have more than doubled in this time frame. Now, what does this really mean is that now you have to manage identity and access and entitlements, all of that, not only in on-prem environment, not only SaaS applications, but also in public cloud environment, where you don't necessarily always have the right level of visibility unless you plan for it. And so this results in an increased set of attack surface, and it's at the same time something that we really need to be very cognizant about. Like in the same way we talked about remote work is work now, we say, cloud security is security, right? So everything is being done in the cloud. Having said that, it does require a deliberate thought and a set of planned actions to make sure we have the right level of visibility, right level of entitlement management, and other things in the cloud before we can say we are confident in adopting that.
So what is it about the cloud per se that makes it so much more difficult to manage identity and access. I mean, you did mention that the attack vector has been expanded dramatically, but it seems as though the cloud is a different entity, right? So you've got on-premises and you've got cloud. On-premises identity and access management, I think traditionally has been not as difficult as it has been with the cloud. So really, why is it so much more difficult?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, in some way, the cloud has been a great accelerator, a great boon for many things in adopting technologies at a faster scale. Some of the problems stay the same, and there's a new class of problems that emerge. So I would not say necessarily it's more difficult, but that it's different. The fact that we can spin up an application in the cloud or microservice in the cloud in a matter of seconds also means that anybody can spin up those services, whether the central IT organization has visibility into that or not, right? While in an on-premise world, yes, if you have more line of sight, you can touch many of the things. Now, but this is a reality. This is not necessarily a bad trend. As everything moves to the cloud, applications become ephemeral. The classic perimeter has disappeared. And what is emerging is identity is the new edge. And what we mean by that is that for any application access or workload, we want to make sure the right people or the right application have the right access at the right time. Now, we need to make sure we instrument the same set of capabilities and tool in the public cloud as well, right? And so while most organizations are doing that for the set of sanctioned apps, right, there are also a lot of unsanctioned apps or line of business may be requiring use of certain tools in the cloud where the central IT organization may not be. So it's that identity sprawl combined with application sprawl in the cloud really presents a challenge of scale. Something that it's not that it cannot be overcome, but it requires deliberate thought and planning to make sure, well, let's take the same construct of entitlement management that we do it for the cloud, but now let's extend it to IaaS. So if somebody spins up an application in AWS or Azure, we're also not just looking at the application doing the right thing, that we carry over the same principles of entitlement and access management for those set of applications as well. So in some way, it's an extension, and in some ways, it requires a little bit more deliberate thought and planning. Now, why does it get worse or better? Like I would say, look, there is an aggregation factor here, right? As more and more things move to the cloud, more credentials move to the cloud. And if some of those things are not being managed appropriately, it becomes a pretty lucrative target for attackers to get an easy access into the environment or compromise credentials. So that's why it's really important to make sure we have a handle on that.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like we've been working with the cloud as part of our infrastructure for long enough now that we really shouldn't be having to make the distinction whether something is on cloud or on premises. But still, there are these lines of delineation that exist within organizations as it pertains to how they manage their security and how they manage their applications and how they manage their identities and so on and so forth. Do you think we'll ever get to that point where it really is going to be just one environment, regardless of whether part of it is in the cloud and part of it is on-prem or what have you?
Look, I would say some of that is already happening. And I kind of go back to what is the business model of a customer, right? I mean, these are all deployment methods, whether it's cloud or on-prem, and it has to suit the needs of the customer and their business, right? There are organizations which are born in the cloud where 100% access is in the cloud, right? And there are large traditional enterprises which are in the journey to the cloud, right? So a bit of the speed and all of that is going to be determined by the business logic. But you can see this is a secular trend for moving to the cloud. More and more things will be delivered and consumed from the cloud. So this is not a trend which is going to slow down or should slow down anytime soon. Having said that, I think the differences is going to be, is security becoming a first thought when we're thinking of applications in the cloud or not? Right? When the cloud was born, it was really around efficiency and how can we deliver capabilities in a cost-effective manner or easier manner, right? And then security used to be an afterthought. I think all the security practitioners are saying, no, security should be a first thought about how do we instrument some of these systems by design, because the scale is so massive and it can propagate so fast that if you don't take a handle on that early on, it just becomes much, much harder to control it after the fact.
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to securities, there seems to be a lot more unknowns within organizations than knowns, especially when we're talking about the effective access to certain applications and usage rights and things of that nature, and how much somebody should be allowed to access especially within the cloud. Do you feel like security is keeping up with identity and access management in the cloud?
Look, I think in some way it's a rhetorical question, right? You kind of know that the security practitioners have just so much incoming. Like, I empathize with my cyber warriors, brethren and sisters who are fighting the good fight every single day. They have to deal with all of the stuff is coming at them, whether it's ransomware or identity compromise, while making sure the organization is enabled for remote access and everything else. But I think there are a set of things that are complicating the thing even further right now. So the tools exist. It's a matter of how are they orchestrated. So today, if you look at some breaches, whether it's SolarWinds, there was not a single system attack. Attackers are getting sophisticated. They bypassed authentication and then they escalated privilege. So if an organization has implemented capabilities in silos, they will not be able to see the complete picture, right? And that's what the attackers are relying on. The security breaks down at the handshake, that you close the door but leave the windows open. Or the tools of identity governance are not necessarily talking to authentication tools or privileged access management tools. So one way to get ahead of this, rather than being behind the eight ball always, is to unify that in an intelligent way. So the telemetry that you're getting from real-time authentication, from access logins, is being correlated with your governance framework, and it's tied to your privileged access management framework. So by that, what we can ensure is that right person who has the access to the right application only at the right time is indeed the person who is logging in to do the work. And if there is any anomaly, it get escalated. And if we see some repeated attempt at compromising credentials, we can then proactively lock down access, lock down privilege management, and so on and so forth, which is really making the math harder for attackers rather than make it easier for attackers. So we do believe this is where we're leading the industry with our strategy of unified identity security. We believe that fragmentation can no longer be the path forward. We recognize that, in cybersecurity in particular, people want the best of breed because good enough is frankly not good enough in security, right? It needs to be the best. I think that's really the imperative for combining identity access management, privilege management, and IGA in an intelligent way so that cyber warriors can really leverage that automation to stay ahead for once, right? Design a system which is correct by construction so that we're making sure the right things are happening at the right time, and then extending that in the cloud.
All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And certainly anything we can do to kind of streamline identity and access management, the security of it, and just making sure that the information, especially the most critical information, isn't getting into the wrong hands, is certainly a good technology in my mind. So, Bhagwat, thank you so much for having a conversation with me about this. I know this is a topic that is going to be on the minds of many organizations, especially as we move even deeper into the cloud and into universes unknown, so to speak. So thank you so much for your time. Let's have another conversation later on about whatever's on your mind regarding to identity and access management and security thereof.
Sounds good, Charlene. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotek conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotek conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotek conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotek conferences are produced by TechStrong Live and powered by TechStrong Group.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm here now with the webinars preview. We've got great webinars coming up. I always tell you that. We've got them on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. And here are 3 that are happening this week in the hopes that you will mark your calendar and be able to join us. The first one is called Adding DevSecOps to Detect and Protect Your Organization's Workspace. This one is happening tomorrow, Tuesday, March 22nd at 11 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. Enterprises are scrambling to get a handle on data breaches, source code vulnerabilities, and software supply chain issues that have the potential to wreak havoc on an organization's software delivery pipeline. Traditional security implementations revolve around perimeter security posture rather than from within the application. But having perimeter security measures in place, recent security breaches have exposed the fact that security involves paradigms that go far deeper into the application stack. This webinar will focus on how to identify, protect, detect, and respond to application security issues across your organization's work streams by instrumenting the Contrast security platform within the VMware Tanzu ecosystem. Good stuff. All right, the second webinar is called the SRE Role Today and in the Future. This one is also happening tomorrow, Tuesday, March 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Lightstep. The importance of the site reliability engineer role continues to grow, and it is becoming increasingly crucial for businesses to maintain stability and high performance. SREs are responsible for improving the reliability, automation, scalability, and efficiency of software systems so they can run smoothly and deliver a flawless end user experience. This webinar will focus on the fundamental principles of SRE today and what the role of SREs will look like in the future, as well as how SRE teams are set up within an organization, their responsibilities, and new and emerging tactics adopted by SREs. The final webinar today is called Culture Clash on PagerDuty, why DevOps, SRE, and cybersecurity cultures differ. This one is happening Wednesday, March 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by Sonatype. The most beautiful thing about SRE is your error budget. But in cybersecurity, error budgets just can happen when a critical vulnerability is found in zero-day events. This is a great opportunity for SREs, cybersecurity engineers, and researchers, and especially the managers who oversee these roles. There are incredibly different methods and motivations for accelerating delivery and tolerating some risk with an error budget, and the cybersecurity approach of zero tolerance to critical vulnerabilities. Both approaches are absolutely necessary to keep software running in the real world. This webinar focuses on how to structurally support shared aims with service level objectives, or SLOs, and create a better culture across teams in modern DevOps-driven enterprises. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me tomorrow when I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
Okay, next up, we're going to the analyst corner with Mitchell Ashley. Mitch has 2 segments for us today. One features Scale's founder and CEO Eyal Banishti, and Eyal and Mitchell are going to talk about cybersecurity risks facing owners of cryptocurrency. As I said earlier, I have my own views on cryptocurrency, but it's certainly a very popular topic with the audience. So here now is Mitchell and Eyal talking about cybersecurity risks in crypto.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, the pleasure of being joined by Eyal Banishti, who is co-founder and CEO of IronScales. Welcome, Eyal.
Thanks, Mitch. Happy to be here.
Great to be talking with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about IronScales.
So, founder and CEO of IronScales for the past almost 8 years now. Before that, I was doing lots of security research, malware analysis, reverse engineering, software tech lead, these kinds of things. And in the past 8 years with IronScales, we are fighting phishing for companies inside the mailbox, helping them to stop the more targeted social engineering and phishing emails that are landing in their employees' mailboxes.
Yeah, definitely a need for today and in the future, for sure. So a great space to be in. Well, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about cryptocurrencies, and I think the whole phishing and ransomware, or some of the risks tied with that. Maybe if you want to start out some of the thoughts you have about the state of our use of cryptocurrency and what are some of the threats that we either should be paying attention to and aren't, or maybe are top of mind.
That's a good question. The way I see it, cryptocurrency, in any good there is bad, and although people that kind of design cryptocurrency will think about good decentralized kind of way to distribute money and handle money, which is not centralized. I think it was coming with a lot of people are using it. Some people are using it to do some bad things, especially when you look at cybercrime, cyber criminals. Their way to move money around is now much easier. There's no more need for money muling, and people with debit cards taking out money from ATMs or buying expensive jewelry, or all these kinds of techniques that they were using in the past in order to get money out of the accounts after they stole it. Now they can simply convert it into a digital form and mix it and just convert it back into fiat and some other things in a much easier way, which made cyber criminal more accessible to even to entry-level cyber criminals. You don't need to be a big organization now in order to start a small cybercrime shop, especially if you know how to go on the darknet and download phishing kits, and everything is pretty much ready for you, and you get a wallet and you start scamming people and making money.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's not just, we hear about Bitcoin, of course, is one of the most publicly used, but there's also private blockchains, digital currencies. And, I guess in your business, in email and phishing and ransomware, or really any payment, kind of off-book payment, black market kind of thing is going to be happening, or is happening, over digital currencies, which is interesting. You hear in the news sort of we found out who this group in Russia that was doing this one thing. And so it is traceable, maybe not through the Bitcoin technology itself. But it's hard. It's very difficult, and that's, of course, why the bad guys want to be paid in private digital currencies, right?
Yeah, it's difficult. As you mentioned, with some alternate coins, it's even easier for threat actors and cyber criminals to hide their threats, because they're allowing some more advanced privacy and anonymity kind of features that Bitcoin is not enabling by default. So, they don't need to go and mix coins and do all this kind of manual stuff by setting up new fresh wallets and doing the manual work behind hiding the traces. Now it's, in some cases, it's pretty much built in into those some of those new coins. Some of them, got the name dark coins for a reason, because they're really being used, unfortunately, for committing crime and moving money from one side to another.
Are there strategies or things that people who are using cryptocurrencies should take to help protect themselves against either, I guess, having to make those payments for other reasons is not directly related to the currency itself, but any things we should do for our own protection if we're using cryptocurrencies?
It's a good question. First, try to make sure that you don't need to pay in Bitcoin or any other coin because you fell victim to some kind of attack. We see it now by default, especially with ransomware, it's coming automatically with this message and the address of the wallet to where to send the money, where to send the coins. We even know about some companies that keep some coins just as a backup in case they really need to act fast and decrypt files, so they will not need to go through the process of buying coins. You can just go ahead and pay. Unfortunately, it still happens out there. Basically, for crypto coins protection, there are two main strategies. You can keep your wallet on a physical device. There are some even proprietary devices that were designed to be a little bit more secure than just a simple USB stick. It's the safest, but there's always this risk that you will lose it and then you've lost everything. And obviously, you can use some of the cloud services out there. I'm sure that I won't name them, but a short Google kind of search can help people find out the bigger ones that will host it for you and keep it hopefully safe for you.
I guess you've gone mainstream when people losing their USB storage sticks or whatever make it into the crime shows on TV, because I've seen some of that lately. It's interesting. Well, let's talk about sort of the anti-phishing ransomware all within email. I imagine that's still probably the primary communication, right? If you're going to be, well, certainly for phishing, but if someone's going to reach out to you about ransomware, you're going to get an email that say, hey, if you want your data unlocked, go make a payment here through this. So it's something in your line of business, you're going to be in a place to potentially see those things happen, correct?
That's right. Email is still and probably will be in the near future, or even more than that, the main vehicle that threat actors and cyber criminals are using in order to deliver a ransom attack. They're getting more sophisticated. It's no longer a simple attachment. Sometimes they're taking a multi-step kind of way in order to compromise an account or a network before they are demanding the ransom. Now it's no longer just about encryption. It's about the kind of information that they're extracting from the environment, and they're using it in order to hold the company ransom. In exchange for them kind of keeping it private and not posting it online for the public to see. We've seen it happening a lot last year. Many companies fell victim to these kinds of attacks. Nowadays, we see an increase using some other messaging kind of mediums like WhatsApp and text messages, what we call smishing. And we even start to see some activity over collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams and Slack. And it's definitely something that the security community is looking into seriously now to protect as well, in order to make sure that we're staying ahead of the curve and the threat actors are not using this new medium in order to drive bad stuff inside the organization, especially now that people are working remotely and collaboration tools became one of their go-to tools in order to at least try and stay connected and communicate, because we are not in the same office now. So this is yet another surface that now we need to take a close look at and make sure that it's well protected.
Interesting. I'm curious. Say some more about Teams and Slack. What are some of the threats? Like, do you see phishing attacks happening via those mediums? Maybe account gets compromised, and I have access to a Slack group here, so let me do some phishing attacks. Is that kind of how that happens?
It's a great point. Like, now that Teams is being used for companies even to do some intercompany communication, like, between vendors and clients. Some companies are doing their customer support over Slack and Teams because it's nice and easy and customer likes it. So it's opening them up not just for a phishing attack, but a supply chain based attack, because if one of the account on their client or vendor was compromised, now they can use this, what considered to be a trusted channel, in order to send some malicious stuff internally. And like you mentioned, even with an internal compromised account or account takeover incident that normally takes us back to phishing with a phishing email that is asking for credentials and all these kind of things, or just installing something on the endpoint and basically using this compromised account either to kind of do the lateral movement internally, just be present and wait for the right time to jump in and do the bad stuff, or just to keep looking for the ground jewels, but as an insider with the full access to a collaboration tool that is trusted. Like no one these days is suspicious when one of their colleagues is sending them a Teams or a Slack message. It's considered to be pretty much trusted, safe, and secure. And this is exactly where we need to put some extra attention these days.
You have automations and connections to, Zapier and other tools to do potentially nefarious things. Interesting challenge. What would have been some of the advancements that either in the industry or your company, IronScales, and anti-phishing and ransomware from the email side of it? Are we still living with the same challenges and ways of solving it we did 5 or more years ago, or has kind of the technology moved, upscale to in ways that help us we may not even be aware of because we use it every day?
It's a great point. Since the threat landscape has changed and we see more and more kind of phishing attacks and cyber attacks in general, kind of really targeting the human element inside the organization. And again, email is still the main way, but it's not the only way that organizations are targeting the human. And if you add to that we see a real uptrend in BEC, what we call business email compromise, and all those kinds of phishing emails that doesn't necessarily come with any known or even any attachments or link or anything that is known to be bad. There is no real threat when you look at the email content, but the intent, the context is what is that's actually malicious. This is how technologies like IronScales have shifted from being focused on the threat to being focused on the user, wherever he is, whether he's at home, at the office, using Teams, Slack, email, or whatever, and understanding that the user is the new endpoint. Okay, it's not necessarily the iPhone or the laptop or the cloud application that he's using. Is the endpoint, is the target, and in order to protect the user and the organization, modern technologies, messaging, email, and security technologies are first learning the user, learning communication habits, learning what is trusted, what is normal. Okay, and only based on this baseline of understanding the user, understanding the business, how he's communicating, how companies are communicating internally and externally, based on that to look for the deviations, look for the anomaly that you can only flag or only be able to recognize only once you know what's trusted. And instead of going out there and asking, is this email known to be bad? Or just asking, is this email known to be bad? Now companies like IronScales, we ask, okay, it doesn't know to be bad, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good email. So let's ask some more questions in order to understand, is it actually legit? Should it be trusted based on everything that we've learned about the users and the environment?
Yeah, I think we're past even though it still applies, don't click on any links, we're kind of, yes, but there's more to it than, and if you see something, say something. Attacks are getting pretty sophisticated. And like you said, and I've seen this happen before where attackers discover what trusted lines of communications and methods are, like hear about the scams of, electronic signature system going to the CEO and purporting to be from the CFO or whatever, and it's not. But now it's getting more sophisticated in your organization. Well, they rely much more heavily on Slack and these channels or whatever it might be. So
it's no longer about hacking the device. It's about hacking the business process. They're trying to find some flows, like you said. Like, let's see if these guys will wire $100,000 with a single kind of signature by the CFO or the CEO. Let's find So they're trying to find the different thresholds for different companies. Or at the end of the day, essentially, what is broken in their business process that we can basically leverage humans by luring them to do something that they're not supposed to do in order to gain whatever they're after, money, data. So
I saw a phishing attack. Wasn't to me, but that came via text. But it had like a signature at the bottom of this person, their title, their company. I'm like, people don't do that in text. But anyway, it's been
don't
fascinating.
Call me, don't text me. I'm in a conference. I can't speak to you just now, but just do what I'm saying.
Just real quick. I need you.
Real quick.
This is your hand.
I'm about to close a deal.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not only a growing problem, but a changing problem. And so that makes opportunities for a company like IronScales to come out with some unique solutions. So it's great talking with you. Thanks for joining us here and sharing with us, of course, the state of, we drifted a little bit from the crypto topic, but I think it was a good starting place into more generally what's happening in phishing and ransomware. So thank you so much. Great to talk with you, Eyal.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And check out IronScales, ironscales.com, correct? And I think,
correct.
Do you have, I think, a free trial or something folks can leverage there?
Yeah, or just leave us a note. Happy to speak.
Very good. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So we actually have 3 Mitchell sessions today, right? And then here's the third one, also in the analyst corner. Mitchell's with Carl Trebes, SVP Application Security at Imperva. Imperva was one of the founders of the WAF movement. Many people say API security is sort of subverting and making WAFs obsolete. Imperva saw this a year ago and, acquired Cloud Vector. And with that now, they're releasing security products around API security along with their WAFs, of course. And Mitchell and Carl are going to discuss that. It's a great discussion. Here it is.
This is Digital Anarchist.
With the great pleasure of being joined by Carl Trebes. Carl is SVP of AppSec at Imperva. Glad to be talking with you today, Carl.
Great, thanks. Happy to be here.
So before we kind of get into it, because you got some really great news and exciting topic, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about Imperva.
Sure, no, happy to do that. So as you mentioned, I'm responsible for the AppSec portfolio here at Imperva. I just joined Imperva about 5 months ago. Previously I have a long history with application security. I was at F5 for almost 13 years as CTO. And so I actually knew Imperva quite well from my days there because we used to compete head to head with them in the web application firewall space. And so I always had a lot of respect for Imperva and really watched their products and what they were doing, in order to kind of hone ours and make sure that we were responding appropriately. But when the opportunity to join Imperva came up to really drive it, I was very excited about that because, I love security products. It really forces companies to innovate because really in the security space, you're always trying to stay one up on the various attackers and profiles and things like that are happening. And of course, over the last couple of years, you can see that these attacks have actually increased and they become much more sophisticated by both, your typical kind of ransomware hackers to your typical, other types of hackers to nation state, actors and things like that. There's security threats everywhere, and just like that recent Log4j exploit, it shows how pervasive and how long these security threats kind of lived within our applications. And so, Imperva's focus is to really protect applications and data really at the end of the day against various types of threats. And we do that from the vantage point of both having a services kind of SaaS-based offering that we can provide for any customer. And then we also have, an on-premise offering. So we really support kind of that hybrid model of both cloud-based, SaaS as well as on-premise with our products.
And you can operate at scale too. That's oftentimes something not everyone can do, is support, large enterprises as opposed to, smaller organizations too. So
no, absolutely. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we operate a worldwide POP network. So we have almost 50 POPs distributed throughout the world. In fact, we're making major investments this year. We're going to increase that by about 60%. So to provide more capacity as well as better performance in certain geographies, right? So it's all about that. But we're investing heavily in our products and our services this year.
Very good. Well, we're going to talk about API security. You're in the AppSec space, and it is a hot topic. A lot of people are doing some interesting things here, talking a lot about this topic. Tell us about what your announcement was.
Yeah, no, we're real excited to announce that we will be releasing 2 API security new products this year. Actually, within a couple of weeks, you'll see these show up. And these are based actually on an acquisition we did last year of Cloud Vector, which was a leader. It was a small company, but a leader in technology in the API security space. And so we've taken their product and their technology and fully integrated into our offering. So we'll have, like I said, 2 products. One will be integrated with our SaaS offering with our Cloud WAF product. And then the second one will be a cloud native solution. Basically, it's a sensor-based technology that easily integrates into a cloud native, microservices containerized environment. It's very lightweight and easy to use. So we can cover both sides of that. We can cover customers that want to consume this as a SaaS, where they have specific APIs that are external they want to cover, or internally as part of their overall API infrastructure, so that they can classify everything internally as well as externally.
Very good. Well, talk about how this fits within the overall product strategy then. Is it a standalone offering? Is it part of something you're bundling with other offerings within the enterprise?
Yeah, it'll be offered both as standalone as well as bundled with our other offerings. And the way I like to think about it is that if you look at a WAF, for example, web application firewall, it's designed to really protect kind of web-based applications, basic protocol type attacks or things that are happening at the HTTP layer. Whereas API security now is focused more on the business logic associated with the APIs. And that's a lot trickier to support. And so the way I think about it is WAF is the platform, and then this is a security plugin to that platform. So you still want to have the WAF because it protects against a number of exploits that relate to APIs, but then you want to protect against the specific business logic associated with APIs. So like, broken object, logic authentication, those type, BOLA kind of things, that you want to have an API, API sec to protect against that. So for example, like, who was it? Peloton had a major public exploit last May associated with BOLA attacks against their infrastructure, where they could disclose basically customer data out to the world, and that's very much kind of it's an API specific attack, but it specifically attacks a portion of the business logic of that API. And there's others. John Deere had a major exploit, last year as well. Again, these are all public, but these are all through the APIs, and these are all part of things that were in that API OWASP top 10. And that's precisely what we're trying to focus on protecting is, attacks or exploits against that OWASP top 10 that you see.
What do you think some of the reasons why this is such a high interest by customers and organizations creating software? I mean, we were moving to cloud native, more of a porous type of architecture. We're certainly building applications that are using their own APIs, not just sort of the outer access to get into an application. And then, of course, you gave a couple of great examples. Are those some of the drivers, or are you hearing other things?
No, it really is that kind of digital transformation that's driving a lot of this, moving to more of a dev-centric culture, and really what that means now is instead of, your typical kind of operator profile buying a third-party application that's supported by that software vendor, it's now moving into a more dev-centric kind of motion where, your teams are now taking third-party pieces of code like open source and others, and then stitching that together. They're using various GitHub repositories, and then essentially building these applications. Now, to do that, a lot of times they're also having to build custom APIs, or they leverage other third-party APIs. If you take a look at let's say you look at your typical kind of Kubernetes distribution that you may get from like OpenShift or from D2IQ or somewhere else. They have anywhere between 14 to 17 pieces of open source that's already kind of stitched into that. And then, of course, you're building more open source on top of that. Maybe you're doing something like, let's say machine learning. And so, you have a whole AI solution that's built on Kubernetes. So you have even more open source on top of open source. Well, that just opens up a whole new surface that can be attacked, because all these various APIs will have different degrees of security based upon how rigorous, your software team is in implementing these things, right? The other aspect of all this too is that when they're implementing these APIs, again, they're focused on actually enabling the application and the logic of the application. Often security is an afterthought, and more, I think cumbersome is often, the security teams have very limited visibility into actually what's being limited or being built, because often these things are getting built in like these CI/CD type processes, right? And so everything's kind of automated. So basically, you write a piece of code, it gets built, it gets tested, it gets deployed, but often without the benefit of much in the way of actual security on there, because you try to insert yourself into that developer workflow, and that can be quite a problem. So the key for the API solutions is to be able to seamlessly fit into those types of environments and provide, what we're focusing on in this initial release is discovery. Meaning, endpoint discovery, schema discovery, and most important, data discovery. We're leveraging actually a lot of our data solution technology, our data, security technology, so that we can actually identify, different sources, the data. So things like, personal data, credit cards, you name it, things that you don't want to have leak out of your organization.
Interesting. Well, I agree with several things you said too, and it also seems like the pace of change in all of that software, the depth and the breadth of the software that we're using, right? Any elements of it can change at virtually any time or all the time. It's always changing. So how do you keep up with that? So it seems like discovery, I think both an obvious but also a critical place to start, because but you need to know on an ongoing basis, right? It's kind of discovering and rediscovery, constantly knowing what's being used and where it's being used and what it does, right?
Absolutely. So it's an ongoing process where you're continually, sampling and seeing the API transactions, and so what that allows then is you to continually update. And so, update whatever the schemas are or the types of data. Yeah, you have to be vigilant on that. And then once you've identified that, you have a good process around that, then you can start to build policies and enforce, certain aspects of those policies, depending upon, what you want to prevent or block, or you name it, right? And so that's good. That's kind of our next steps, is to start those enforcements as we move forward through it. So what you'll see is we're rolling out, this is kind of the first thing we're rolling out, but throughout the year, you're going to see that we're going to be enhancing that, rapidly, in terms of adding additional security features and functions to help remediate, when attacks are present.
So just starting with discovery also help you get into the kind of first steps of that flow of creating software. You mentioned CI/CD and the whole pipeline, that getting that data initially, and then later when you can come back with enforcement or recommendation engines or whatever the process is, right, for here's how to improve the security of software that you're actively writing. Then security people aren't showing up with their notepads and pens and saying, what are you doing? We need to know. It's already happened. It's built into the flow.
Exactly. And so what that means is then there's an ongoing, a flow for the security professionals to actually see what's happening, and then they can be smarter about how they build the policies, right? And then work with the DevOps or the DevSecOps teams to implement those policies. But ultimately the idea is that we want to have the product, automate, a response based upon those policies. We do that today already on the Cloud WAF side. We do that with our bot protections. We do that with our DDoS. And a lot of those mechanisms we'll be able to leverage as we build these policies, to help drive that, signatures or other types of things. But we also want to have more specific flows, that prevent these types of exploits, like I just mentioned, automatically, as we go forward.
I think one of the benefits too, and we've learned this over and over with discovery kinds of technologies, whether it's what devices are on the network or traffic that's flowing, I would think this would be a great source of information for security teams just to know. I didn't realize that we're talking to these services, external services. I didn't know that we were building services that we're having other people talk to, through these APIs. Maybe it's documented, maybe it's not well documented, but now you really have a better picture of the landscape of what you're trying to secure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, often, most, you'll just look at your typical single page app. How many API calls is it making out to various different other applications? They could be mobile, they could be, across the country, they could be another country. You just don't know who they're making calls out to. And so just getting a handle on what's talking to what and mapping that out and understanding the types of transactions that are happening is huge. And often, developers don't have the full picture of that either, because you have development teams working on different parts of this. So, different teams see different parts of the elephant. Well, security needs to see that whole elephant, in the mix. And so the way to do that is to ensure that you have an accurate, up-to-date map of where things are going. And I think once they see that, then they can take action. But the key is to see it first, that whole discovery process.
Now, are you selling this to the security organization? Or are you selling it into the software dev organization? That's always the debate of who's bringing in the AppSec tool, which is the better path, or is it both?
Yeah, generally it's the security teams that are making the policies and enforcing those, and then those roll down to the teams. The teams generally want to pick tools, right? So especially on like that whole CI/CD part of the process, developers are super opinionated about the tool flows and the tool chains and how things are done in their software.
They are passionate.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter what security says all day long, unless something is easy for that team to consume and they have some buy-in on that, then it's not going to happen. And that's why, like I said, one of the reasons we're going to be offering this cloud native version that sits as a very lightweight sensor in those environments is that it can be easily integrated into that flow without disrupting the process or impacting performance. When you look at some of the other vendors out there, they tend to be much more heavyweight and much harder to insert into that part of the process. And so we wanted to make that easy and as lightweight as possible. It's one of the reasons we acquired Cloud Vector specifically to have access to that technology. And then on the other hand, obviously with our SaaS-based offering, which many don't have, that's again another seamless way to actually inspect all traffic kind of originating from your web apps or coming to it actually, right? So that you can actually see what's happening there without interfering with the security team or the development teams on that. So again, it's to make it as security in general should be transparent and seamless as possible to the application, and that's kind of the motto here. And if it's not, then of course developers just they'll find ways around it. Developers, that's what they do.
I like the thought of frictionless security or low friction, right? Don't cause them to slow down, right? Keep going at the pace you're going. I'm curious, just haven't gone through product life cycles myself. There's this interesting phenomenon. You create and build a product from lots of customer input, but when you put it in their hands, you also learn some really interesting things. I'm curious if there are some things that you picked up along the way in your alpha or beta testing with your customers with this new product launch.
Yeah, so we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. Mainly it's the typical feedback is around usability. That we'll get. It's like, okay, it's not as intuitive to do this, or having something presented this way. The feedback's been very positive about, what the tools are, what the product is showing. But again, it usually goes back to kind of look, feel, how it fits into their workflows. We got a lot of great information on that. And so that all gets fed back into the development team, and then we prioritize and then kind of work against that, because again, like I was saying, is that, security, well, actually I hadn't said this, but I'll say it now, is that the way customers tend to perceive security is that it's all about cost. meaning that, and it's like an insurance policy. They're willing to spend so much against the perceived amount of risk. And cost also is associated with usability. And so the key is to make it as useful and easy for them to consume. And that way their overall cost then is lower. And so then they can make better use out of it. So a lot of the feedback we tend to get is around that kind of look, feel, and how it works, and, kind of that flow and how intuitive it is. And so again, we strive to really, to improve those aspects of the product.
That's really important feedback too, because that's going to increase your adoption and use of the product, right?
Absolutely, and it's all about the customer too. We really want them to, we want to make it easy and as intuitive as possible, especially given the complexity of what APIs address, right? These, you have all sorts of things happening across these APIs. You're doing automation, you're pulling data. There's a lot. It's critical to their infrastructure, and so if there's anything that interferes with that or makes that more difficult, then it makes it exponentially harder for customers to want to use and consume your products. And we want to make it easy.
Great. Anything else about the announcement we want to make sure we cover?
No, I think it's just, it's just one new piece of innovation from Imperva. We're really focused on all aspects of our portfolio. This is a major new area that we're moving into. But you'll see a lot of other areas that we're addressing, like in our bot protections, and the reason I bring up bot is that it's fairly tightly coupled to how attacks proceed against APIs. Typically, you're doing things, using bot networks to go do things like, surveil, your APIs. Maybe what they do is they'll go and they'll find out a valid username, and then they'll start pounding it to get your APIs to see if they can, basically forcefully take over an account or do things like that. And so we want to make sure is that the bot is also kind of matched to the API side, and that we're kind of elevating its abilities to automatically detect and do things, and so that it limits that attack surface, right? You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, hey, it's fine that I'm protecting the APIs, but I also want to reduce the mechanisms that allow those attacks. Same with our Cloud WAF and our WAF products in general, is that we want to reduce that surface as much as possible. So it's not just about any one solution; it's about our portfolio and its ability to really defend, your entire environment.
I think we've all learned there's no silver bullet, magic bullet, right? It's how these things work in concert.
Absolutely.
Happen. Well, where can folks find out more?
Sure. So we'll be actually making some big announcements, but all the information is available at imperva.com, imperva.com.
Great. Carl Trivas, thank you very much, SVP with Imperva. Thanks for joining us today, and congratulations on the announcement.
Thank you so much.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Okay, next up, it's The View with Vizard, Mike Vizard, Chief Content Officer here at TechStrong. In this segment, Mike meets with Brian Feit. Brian is the Global Account CISO for BT Americas. And Brian is going to explain and talk with Mike about why security and network management are converging into a single service. What's old is new again, folks. That's the way it used to be. Anyway, here's Mike Vizard with The View with Vizard.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Brian Feit, who is Global Account CISO for BT Americas. We're going to be talking about all things related to security, networking, and AI, and all kinds of fun stuff like that. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
It seems to me, at least, that there's more organizations relying on external expertise, managed services to manage both the network and the security that goes with that. Are we starting to see more convergence of networking and security? And is that in turn increasing reliance on external expertise because it's just getting too hard?
Yeah, we think we are. We're seeing convergence in a lot of different places, but specifically between, traditional network operations and engineering and, security, which used to be, I think, called the Bureau of No, that now has to facilitate yes. So it, really does push those two groups together. And what we're seeing is that if you're doing things in a stovepipe fashion, you're missing opportunities. So whether the convergence is coming into a single role or just creating forums where stakeholders can dialogue, we're seeing that happen a lot more out of necessity. And some of it is because of the pace of change, the requirements for innovation and being able to move faster, but more securely. And then with regards to the ecosystem and leveraging people outside, it does take a village. And I think what we're learning is that that without that outside in view, we are also missing opportunities. Now, it hasn't been easy, and a lot of it has been from necessity, but the adversaries are out there. They partner well, they leverage their ecosystems. So we absolutely have to do it on this side of the fence also.
As part of that, it also seems that the control plane for all of these things is shifted to the cloud. And is that making it easier to drive that level of convergence because we do have this new single point from which we can collaborate?
Yeah, I think cloud has absolutely changed the dynamic. Maybe the innovation is not so much the technology, because a lot of it's the same. It's the consumption model. It's the ability to flex and expand. Now, that with it comes a challenge, because when we were managing, as an industry, our own estates and our own data centers with our own people, that sense of confidence came from a combination of trust and control. And that's where we had, the perimeter, everything inside the fence is trustworthy. We know that's not the reality we live in right now. But the unique opportunity that we have with massive cloud adoption, besides the consumption model and being able to flex that, is this idea of, I think, software-defined everything. And if we really treat, security as code and create our pipelines, we can actually allow the business to move faster, but safely. And I'll give you an example. In a lot of shops, historically, legacy apps, the developers were required to do everything. So InfoSec would sit on high, say, this is the way it should be. And then we'd expect people who were more interested in user experience and efficiency of code to also roll their own crypto or handle, validating, parsing, things of that nature. With a proper CI/CD pipeline, leveraging the dynamic nature of the cloud, we can actually build the security in by design, make it easy for developers to do the right thing, because they can just use whatever central authentication system or encryption or PKI, whatever it happens to be, so they can focus on getting the applications right and this iteration. We're not going to wait once a month on Tuesday to patch everything, right? It's always going to be happening in real time. So I do think there's a unique opportunity. I think a lot of the challenges are the same. And there is probably one big watch out in the cloud: the technology sprawl, the ability for what we'll call shadow IT, for lack of a better term, to pop up and doing things that we're not aware of. So it's super important to have that visibility to what's going on and to create models. And then when you see something that's wrong with that model, be able to quickly get the fix into the pipeline and have this continuous compliance with your standards, continuous improvement through the pipeline. And the cloud is probably the only thing that makes that possible. And I think also early days for cloud, most people were very focused on one specific cloud. Now what we're seeing is they're trying to containerize or insulate themselves from vendor lock-in, possibly, or you'll hear the term multi-cloud strategies. But I think also for resiliency. because there's a lot of dependencies that are going on. And if one cloud, if you bet everything on one cloud strategy, how fast or hard would it be to move your workloads to another cloud? And so we like to see that abstraction layer. And with a lot of our clients, we really talked to them about that, to do the total cost of ownership and how painful would it be if we wanted to spin up more capacity. Could we leverage everything we've already done, or do we have to go retool and relearn? And to your earlier question about partnering, that's where that deep knowledge, you might be able to insulate the business from some of those complexities, but eventually somebody's really got to understand how that cloud works to be able to get the same functionality and to validate that it's a good business decision.
Mm-hmm. We hear a lot about AI these days. Do you think that that is also going to drive people to rely more on an external expert? Because it seems to me a lot of the internal organizations aren't really set up or even capable of creating those AI models. So is the nature of the business going to change anyway because we look to take advantage of AI?
Well, I think so. AI and machine learning, one of the things that's real important to understand is you have to teach them. And if you're not giving them good signals and you're not teaching them the right use cases, they will create blind spots. And then you have a dependency on something. And when it spits out the wrong answer, you're not really sure why. And so I think in a lot of these, what we'll call green fields, if you're starting from scratch, it probably doesn't make sense to go out there and build your own knowledge bases or feed your own use cases. I think what's happened, a lot of people created data lakes. So we go about 10 years ago, creating these massive data lakes with all these signals. And then they have data scientists. Well, they can find things out, but if you don't ask them the right question, they can't do it. So if I look at an expert system or machine learning or AIs, I do think that when you have vendors who've created it and they have all these endpoints with all these signals coming in, that distributed sensor array, you're not going to get that just by building it yourself. So right there, your data sets are probably bigger. For very specific industries or use cases, they probably hear more horror stories than you do, hopefully. So they'll be able to put those learnings and the use cases together. And then, of course, what organizations do when they see those events and what they decide to do with automation, which is the really big trend that we're seeing around meeting the demand of the adversaries are putting on us, but also the skill shortage and the rate of technology. The one watch out that I would say before you start giving over control to algorithms is just make sure, I say there's one way to fail at scale, and that's to automate a broken business process. So it's really important to understand that you have the good business process, that you're really sure about what you want to happen, and then whenever possible, I would say remove human discretion whenever possible, because the automated response can move faster. It will be consistent. A lot of times the human firewall can be the vulnerability or even analysis paralysis. But you got to be really careful when you're doing automated response that you understand your model and what the expectation is. And then, of course, once it's response, make sure that it was the correct response, because there'll be cases where it wasn't, and you got to make sure that postmortem or that learning comes back into the system. So if you are going to use third parties, I think it makes sense in certain spaces. It probably is going to be a lot more cost effective, and you're probably going to you're not going to have to train your own AIs to do what you need it to do. So I think there is a lot of value in that, and it's kind of daunting. I mean, AI, what is it? When you start really looking under, it could be a lot of different algorithms, it's pieces and parts. So I absolutely think that's the way to go. And, BT's making some big bets on that also in some of our product platforms.
All right. In the land of security, of course, there's no shortage of buzzword bingo games to play, but we hear a lot about zero trust and we hear a lot about DevSecOps these days. Neither one of those things are things you necessarily buy. They're more like processes, but are they kind of two sides of the same coin? Am I really thinking about one is aimed at the pre-production environment and the other one is at the post-production environment?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of what we do in my practice is we try to cut through the marketing buzzwords and talk about capabilities. And then that eventually leads back to actual controls that you can put in place. I cut my teeth in the civil servant during the Cold War. And that's when, had a single adversary, unlimited budgets. And we practiced something kind of like zero trust, least privilege. About every 5 years or so, it gets reinvented. But I think we do have to really embrace the idea that that we operate in hostile environments, even on the inside of a trusted perimeter. And if you design the system to be that way and remove the ability for an adversary to pivot and don't burden the end user, right? You make it super easy for them to do the right thing and really hard to do the wrong thing, then those zero trust principles are awesome. Now, those are aspirational, right? So if you want to aspire to some of those and you start to look at your maturity, it's real easy to figure out kind of where you are in the maturity continuum. You always have to make sure that if you're investing in a zero trust journey or least privilege or role-based access controls, that you can, the Bureau of Yes, the facilities of Yes that now the CISOs have become, they really have to understand their business stakeholders. Now, with regards to CI/CD and pipeline, I really love the idea. I have a really good friend, in the early days, system admins used to treat their servers like pets. They would give them cool names. The system admin was really the one who could control that. And if you had a good system admin, you had happy customers, secure data, that was all good. But as we started to scale up, we kind of started treating them like cattle. And the problem with the cattle is that they're all drinking from the same and eating from the same trough, and there's some poison or something bad, then your whole flock or herd can die. So the analogy that my friend is using with workloads that are moving to the cloud or that are in the pipeline, let's treat them like Kleenex or needles. We don't reuse needles. We throw them away and rebuild from a known good. So if you're starting to do some of that, you remove the legacy. Absolutely, part of that pipeline has to be the testing. And I think now that we are with compute, there would be a lot of use cases or threat catalog items that we would never look at because they were, 500 years this, and it just didn't make sense because it was very time consuming and handcrafted to have somebody go off and do a risk assessment. I've been in organizations where they might take 3 to 6 months to just answer one business question. And by that time, the business already got a waiver and they're using whatever technology. So with the pipelines that you're talking about coming out the other end, here's our standards, here's our business drivers, and here is the workload of product that comes out of that other pipeline. The ability to test for compliance ahead of time. And that's conformance with external regulation, your own standards, the stakeholders that you're responsible for, giving them meaningful KPIs so that they can see a dashboard and know that the things they care about are actually in there. I do think there is a great opportunity, and I'll even go so far as because, the themes for the last 2 years with me has been really about modeling, assessing, and simulation. So if I can get those into my QA pipeline, and it's happening constantly in near real time, that is all goodness. And I believe that we can quantifiably reduce or eliminate entire classes of attacks effectiveness if we're adopting a practice like that. And we will need it because the adversaries are innovating and they're using a lot of these techniques, and because they don't have the burden of legacy systems, right? Or they're just time sharing or renting assets. It's definitely still an asymmetric challenge.
You guys have partnered with a lot of different security vendors over the last couple of years, and you've also invested in Salt Security. What drives the decision as to whether to partner or invest? And what is the signal that you're sending to the customer if you invest in somebody else?
Yeah, we're trying to so early on, I've been with BT for 13 years. When I joined, we had a lot of really cool accounts, but they were all bespoke, or what's the British term for custom. And when you're building something custom just for it, you could do a great job, but it's not inexpensive. And it's not just inexpensive in dollars and cents, but in time and stakeholder management. And so that would also require that a lot of what we were doing would be throwaway. We would only develop that capability for this one particular customer or vertical or use case. What we decided and figured out was we can get the economy of scales. We need those capabilities. So a lot of times when you'll hear us talk about some of our solutions, they might not have specific part numbers, but it's more of how we engage or the platform. With regards to, we made a significant investment last year in a company called Cybersecurity. With its modeling, assessment, and simulation work that we do, a lot of that would be something very specific. So a custom scope of work and engagement where we would go in and handcraft the model, and it would be to answer a very specific business question. And then that model would go on the shelf, and the next time we were engaged, we'd come up with another model. What SAFE has allowed us to do is take that methodology and put it into a completely automated practice where instead of once a year audit cycles, where we get to give a report, make a recommendation, and you meet your compliance obligation, maybe the CISO gets a little bit of insight into where they have some challenges. Operations very rarely enjoys those audits. They're not getting a lot of value because what comes out the other end is a bunch of to-dos for them. But what this model allows us to do is not just do it once a year, but do it continuously. And the more you feed the model the real data, the better you're going to be able to have a dialogue with the stakeholders. And so while InfoSec really wants this to happen because it's going to mitigate so much risk, and they know that that's where the next attack's coming from, if you're burdening operations, so it lets those stakeholders who are very rarely in the same room use this model to ask a question and find the optimum solution. Because of all the 10,000 things we could sell you or somebody else could sell you, there's probably a smaller list of that of what you really need. And there's probably a subset of that where this partner's the best. So one of the things that I really enjoy about BT and makes it super fun and exciting and challenging is that we partner better with it than anybody else. And we are willing to have those kind of conversations with certain partners that maybe on the face seem like, don't you compete? Well, some places we do, but at the end of the day, it's the client security and this global neighborhood that we live in. If your neighbors aren't safe and secure, you can't have a secure house either. So I think partnering is important. We are fairly conservative. If we can do it ourselves and have the ability to scale it, we will. A lot of times we have to invent our own stuff beginning, but we might not. That might not be what we do in 5 or 10 years because it really doesn't make sense for us to be in that business. And we've gone through a lot of changes in the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 years, where a lot of people now are getting digitally disrupted. We leaned into that and come up with this internal name of Digico. So if the old way of doing business was Netco and we were a carrier that was selling, point-to-point circuits, where's the value? How are we going to evolve? And that's this new Digico model, which is very exciting. And that's really influencing investments like in SAFE and our Eagle Eye platform, which is super interesting also. There's no part number for it, right? But it's a capability and a methodology. And whether you adopt ours or somebody else, we believe this is the way to evolve into the future because it's not going to get any easier.
What is the one thing you wish customers would do more aggressively to make their lives easier and maybe your own life easier? I guess I'm asking the question, as you go in and you have a new customer, what's the one thing that you see over and over again that drives you crazy?
Yeah, I think it's the idea that, innovation sometimes only means cost savings. And that a lot of time there'll be a really good initiative. I mean, if you look at SD-WAN, SD-WAN is it makes sense. Or this idea of software defined everything, right? I think it makes really good sense. But people are running headlong. They're getting rid of private circuits, and it's like, okay, let's run that use case. Do you ever need a private circuit? Well, if you need an SLA, maybe you do. So when you make those moves, you don't take all the savings at once. You got to put some back in and invest it. And that requires you to kind of think about the next big challenge. So when I talk about understanding novel threat catalog items, especially in reliance now on public internet, I mean, there are no real SLAs about public internet. So you got to have some resiliency and do some threat models that say, well, what happens if this major link gets taken away? Will that, maybe that 5G uplink backup circuit that you have, will that carry it? Do you need maybe some other diversity? Do you need deeper visibility into how your traffic's being routed? Because I could see scenarios, and I actually model some of these where it's not just a fiber cut or just a denial of service attack, but it's a compound attack. And again, when we're looking at being able to run models and compute's pretty cheap, storage is cheap. Why not run through some of those models before you make a big change? And then when you see, wow, we might have some exposure, let's do the extra work, not just take the savings of how do we want to reinvest that? Is it dividends for our shareholders, or is it automating something? And I see a lot of missed opportunities there with these transformations, and primarily it's because you don't have all the stakeholders in the same room. And so I love not the boring governance stuff. I like the really cool governance where stakeholders get together, they have an opportunity to scream, shout, jump up and down. But when they come out of it, they've got a joined up plan and they believe in it. The only other thing besides, because that's my kumbaya, the way I'd like to see everybody get along, I still see the basics where people think they have good hygiene and they don't. And then, with your digital footprint, you're creating what I call corporate identity assets or corporate digital assets that are outside of your, their third party, and understanding those dependencies, because those dependencies, again, this is modeling. You could have dependencies on third parties that you have no visibility to or contracts with. You could become collateral damage in something that you have a dependency on. So understanding what those are, why do you trust your GitHub repositories? Are you leaking secrets into those places? Those kind of hygiene things that would never happen in the old world, except if a sysadmin, took their laptop home to do some work on the weekend, right? We've heard those horror stories. But I think that is actually the types of things that are happening with this kind of giant ecosystem of embracing open source and repositories. But what happens if that repository isn't there when you need it? Or what happens if that becomes a poison well? And so I think it's important to understand those bits. But 9 times out of 10, when we see a postmortem on something, the human firewall has found the vulnerability, right? Social engineering, or it was a basic hygiene that people didn't know about or didn't understand, and that's all very preventable.
All right. Hey, Brian, thanks for being on the show. IT, as always, is a team sport and was when I was young and will continue to be well into the future. Hey, best of luck in your adventures, and we look forward to having you back on the show someday.
Excellent. Thanks for the time. Safe computing.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, everyone. We hope you really enjoyed today's show. It was a great show. We had some fantastic content. We'll be back tomorrow with even more content, fresh new content. And we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel. Be safe, be strong, tech strong.